You know, he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome back to Getting Lit. Last week we discussed Roland Barthes' Camera Lucida and Chris Marker's experimental time travel film La Jetée. And this week we're doing something very special. But before we head into the episode, a bit of housekeeping. The show is now hosted solely by me. You probably got this idea after the last few episodes, which were just sort of me and the other co-hosts weren't there. Rio and Ruben are no longer the co-hosts. There was no dispute or fights or hard feelings or anything. It's just about the level of commitment to the show that they can offer. So I'm going to be going it alone from now on. Both Rio and Ruben have an open invitation to come on whenever they want, but it will be me driving the show now, which I'm very excited about, to be honest. I'm very excited about just recording regularly and just really getting into bringing you a whole heap of amazing art and amazing guests too. Anyway, on to today's show. This episode, I've invited former and future guests on to talk about books, TV, films, whatever they're most passionate about at the moment. The only stipulation was that they could only choose two things. One piece of art or media or book, movie, whatever, had to be old and the other had to be new. So I recorded the segments with each guest separately. So it's a lovely sort of chain of one-on-ones. It all adds up to a pretty supersized episode with a lot of great chatter. So please get comfortable and enjoy. And first cab off the rank, our first guest is a two-time guest on Getting Lit, Paul Della Rosa, who's the wonderful author of a really great short story collection called An Exciting and Vivid Inner Life, which I will link to in the episode description. You should go buy it if you can. This whole thing is sort of like something old, something new, but the kind of uniting kind of thing behind them is things you're passionate about, like passions. It's a really cheap way to get content too, because I don't have to do any homework.
I think that makes sense. Well, yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about what I'm passionate about, what inspires me.
Awesome.
I don't know, everything's so lacking in energy lately, and everything seems really not depressing in a mood way, but almost just sort of like vampirically sucking energy away. And I suppose a lot of my time is about building it back up.
Yes. It does feel like the culture is on ketamine, doesn't it? And maybe it is.
I don't know. Maybe ketamine would be more interesting. It seems like this, intense need for stimulation and takes at all time is just I don't know. It's just bad. It's a dark thing.
So what have you been doing since last you were on? Because last time you were on, we went out together, all three of us, when there were three hosts of this show. Now there's only me. But what have you been up to, Paul?
Yeah, so my book came out. I was doing, I guess, a lot of press for that. And then I had a few artist residencies working on the new book. So the next book that, is as yet untitled and not on contract.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to America to this old residency there, MacDowell, in the kind of New Hampshire woods, and sort of felt myself going a bit deranged in this wooden cabin where I was terrified of getting Lyme disease, which people will say is fake, but everyone just talks about it constantly. So you kind of get on this really heightened tick alert.
But that's because all the people who go to those sorts of residencies are the sorts of people with invisible illnesses,
well, it's I do,
or gluten intolerance or something like that,
Yeah, I totally, I do believe in Lyme disease. I just think that intense, it was just intensely paranoid, but it was great. Then, I spent some time in New York. Then I did a residency for the Di Trapano Foundation in Sezze in Italy. Yeah, it was great.
And when you were in New York, you went on Sean's podcast, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sean Conroy's.
Yeah, that was a fun episode. I like that. He needs to do more of them, I think. Like, he's a bit infrequent, but I guess he's too busy writing.
Well, he used to do them all the time. Like, if you go and actually look at the backlog of it, it's like, I don't know the exact number, but it feels like hundreds. Maybe it's not hundreds. It's probably like, you'll check it, it's like 35. But it feels like that. Sean, he has two qualities that kind of compete, and I think that's what makes it interesting. So on one hand, he's very sort of laid back and easygoing, but at the same time, he's incredibly intense about writing. So it kind of leads people, into a space where they can talk about writing, and he's also just not interested in a lot of things that I think a lot of places are interesting. The podcast has nothing to do with publicity, which I think people, I don't know, it's like a glass of water after wandering in a desert. It's really...
Yeah. Anyway, so what have you brought to the table? Do you want to talk about your old or your new first?
Let's talk about the old.
All right, let's go.
So what I've brought, and I have it in front of me, is an old Penguin it's a Penguin Classics version of Truman Capote's Music for Chameleons.
And I've not heard of this one.
It has a wonderful cover of Truman looking sort of breathless and drunk, dancing with Marilyn Monroe.
Amazing.
So it was a book that he wrote. I suppose my understanding is it's the last book he published. So my understanding is Answered Prayers was only published in its incomplete version after his death. And then there was this period of time, which, was actually quite lengthy in his life after he did In Cold Blood, where he kept getting advances to write the next book. And quite famously, he sort of spoke about his manuscript, Answered Prayers, and he would speak about it in like incredible detail, but then it sort of never materialized. So there are chapters of it that were published in Esquire. One of them kind of ended up being a bomb that he sort of detonated in his own life, where he revealed a lot of society secrets of the society women of New York and was henceforth sort of banished from certain social circles. And Music for Chameleons is an odd book because it's not one book, it's a collection of lots of different things. So there's sort of, I think, a few, maybe 7 short stories. One of them is a chapter that was meant to be a chapter of Answered Prayers, but was decided to be done as its own independent story. Then there's a sort of small non-fiction short novel, sort of in the style of In Cold Blood, called Hand-Carved Coffins. And then, which is what I think is my favorite, there's a group of what Truman Capote calls his conversational portraits. So they're these kind of like little stories or reported pieces, normally when he's in conversation with someone, sort of going through a scene. So in one of them, he follows, I believe she's a Jamaican cleaning woman, through these like Manhattan apartments while they both get high. Then there's another where he meets Marilyn Monroe at a funeral, and then they go out for champagne. So there's all sorts of different things. One of them, he's interviewing one of the, it's a killer that was connected to the Mansons, but wasn't in the famous killings. I think it was the killings that happened before the Sharon Tate killing. And there was some kind of idea that perhaps those killings were done to release this member of the Manson family beforehand, if I remember correctly. But they're really great.
Was it was it a woman or a man?
It was a man.
Oh, okay. Because there's that one woman, I think it's from the Manson kind of family, who John Waters is obsessed with. Like, I think it was from her or some other kind of murderous cult that he kind of became pen pals with. But yeah, okay. So it's nonfiction kind of.
Yeah,
book?
it's largely nonfiction, but like I said, there's a collection of 6 short stories, and then 7 conversational portraits, and then Handcuffed Coffins, which I think most people, from what I can remember in my reading, people say is not really a nonfiction novel in any sense of the word, but is riveting.
So what lights your fire about this one? Like, is it the, you know, the sort of skipping between genres and forms or whatever, or is it just his particular style?
I think what it is personally for me, I think it's Truman Capote's best book. I think, you know, he's a brilliant stylist and he's kind of like a luminous prose writer. But I find in his earlier works, there's a certain, how do I describe it? It's sort of similar to Cheever in some ways. There's a kind of movement away from portraying things that are seedy. So, you know, he would do sort of, you know, the Christmas Miracle or these big stories, and there would be elements of darkness in them, but Music for Chameleons is really when he's a bit older and is just sort of writing in a really gossipy way, often a kind of bitchy way, and often with kind of explicit sex, which seems to be sort of rare in the earlier work, which is still great, but for me, Music for Chameleons is just, sort of dazzling.
Yeah, you find that with a lot of gay writers, actually. Well, no, not a lot of gay writers. You find the opposite, is that they do their kind of like, and this is probably a generational thing too. So, like, obviously Truman Capote is from a very much older generation, but like now you have the gay writers who are like, they have the kind of orgiastic sort of Dionysian first book or whatever, and then it gradually gets a little bit more, as if they get successful, gradually gets a little bit more tame. This is interesting that he had the reverse trajectory back then.
I think it's just really similar for people of that generation, which was that certain things couldn't really be, you know, depicted and then probably published in the New Yorker. It would be sort of too dark. Like, you even have that with, say, you know, if you read, say, for example, like Tennessee Williams, his plays can be explicit, but especially the gay stuff is sort of, it's very clearly there, but it's always kind of referred to or something coded or understood. But then, say, for example, I remember reading a selection of his diaries that I think the Paris Review published years ago, and like, it's just extremely frank and explicit. And amazing. From memory, there's someone who's supposedly modeled on Tennessee Williams in Answered Prayers as a character who has called for a rent boy, and the rent boy is the main character, who's so this is Men and Women from memory.
So in terms of Capote's stuff, I've only really read In Cold Blood, like every other basic bitch. But in terms of his, you said he is a kind of exquisite kind of prose stylist. What about this kind of later book does it for you? Is it just that he's kind of, you know, at the height of his powers, and he's also a bit loose with the subject matter as well, or?
I think it's looser with subject matter, but he's also kind of tighter stylistically. So maybe in some of the earlier ones, I don't really like critiquing his style because, quite frankly, he's a better stylist than I am. But in his earlier work, sometimes there's, I wouldn't say it's a floridness, but there is a certain sort of laboring over descriptions. And where Music for Chameleons has that, it's just sort of often more maybe abbreviated and sort of more direct, which is something he wrote about or would talk about when he was making the transition from In Cold Blood to then writing Answered Prayers, where he was sort of talking about, you know, these great breaks of style. Though he also talked a lot of shit, so sometimes it's hard to know what in all of like the material that remains of him, what was serious, what wasn't, and what was this kind of self-construction of him constructing himself time and time again. But it's just brilliant. It's just, highly recommend it.
I love that that he got more gossipy, like more openly gossipy in his books later on. Kind of like, have you ever read Kenneth Anger's Hollywood Babylon?
Yes.
Oh my God, it's so good. I'm thinking I'm going to do that one day, like on the pod, because like it's so incredible. And also I've heard like rumors about the much he was going to do another one. I think he did the first one, and was it the second one that he did? And then I've only read the first one. But apparently there's a third one as well, and that would be more modern stars that he's going to be like gossiping about. And that sounds really good.
That's intriguing.
Yeah. But
I love the thing of like the idea of a manuscript that may or may not exist. I find it very enthralling and titillating.
Yeah, that's basically like my book at the moment, but we don't need to go into that. And everyone's work in progress, really. But so, okay. Did you have anything more to say about Truman Capote?
I think that's done it.
All right. What's your new one?
Well, I've realized my new one actually isn't that new. So it's from 2016.
That's
yeah, I didn't think you were going to argue with me. So that's all right. So it's David Shapiro's novel Supremacist, which came out from Tyrant Books, in 2016. But it is this really sort of fun and energizing novel, and the whole sort of plot is that this man gets an inheritance and he's about to, I can't recall off the top of my head if he's in law school or he's about to go to law school or he's about to enter his law job, but he has this time where he can do something. So he decides that he wants to visit every Supreme store in the world. So it's his sort of pilgrimage to the stores, and he's kind of, has an alcohol problem, has a pill problem, and he goes on this sort of like adventure with one of his close friends named Camilla, who he tells sort of early in the novel at dinner that the reason he invited her to go on the trip is because he thought if she was there, he wouldn't kill himself. So it's really, it's just it's a wild novel. It's very fun. The protagonist has this quality which it's not the English word likable. I don't really like the idea of a likable character, but the character's very like simpatico. There's something deeply empathetic about him, and even when he's sort of struggling, you sort of care for him in this very deep way.
Yeah, I like that idea too of like simpatico as opposed to likable characters, because so many of my favorite characters are extremely unlikable. But they are simpatico, so in terms of the book itself, like what about it is sort of turns you on? Like, is it the the meeting of like streetwear versus literariness and dark themes of suicide and things like that? Is that what kind of gets you off?
I think it's not even... I don't think it's even a sort of a darkness. I think I'm always fascinated by when someone is extremely obsessed with one thing. It's like that. Oh my God. I can't remember the D.H. Lawrence quote, but the one about, is it like the description of a leaf could describe the world, or it's something along those lines. I might have made that up, but it's like this man's intense obsession with Supreme. There's kind of this entryway into all of these other things, and even just the excitement for Supreme, the compulsion for it is just energizing. It's just really, really fun.
Does it have that sort of autistic American Psycho detail about the brands and like all the clothes and everything, or
it goes into incredible detail? Like even the book, it's printed on this sort of like high gloss paper, and from memory, I think Giancarlo, so the late editor of Tyrant Books, had to have it published in China so he could get the paper stock right, because it's high gloss, because it has all of these Polaroids inside of it of Supreme products. And there's this really sort of intense details about what the products are, what each release is, what season it is, these sort of theories about Supreme in this really incredible way. It sort of goes into these online forums about Supreme and the differences between Supreme and other brands. It's just really, really incredible. And even the sort of idea of Supreme as a school skateboarder brand, but that the main character realizes that he's not a skater and he's not really cool enough to wear Supreme, but he understands the references of Supreme, not in an entirely ironic or unaware way, which makes him slightly better than like teenagers going there to buy shit or something.
Sorry.
Yeah. No.
How is all that detail rendered in the book? Like, is it a sort of first person monomaniacal kind of diatribe, or is it just like inserts into it or whatever? I'm just curious.
It's predominantly conversations.
Okay.
So he often has conversations with people where he sort of talks about it. So, for example, like I could read one bit and you would like sort of understand it. Camilla said, "You keep comparing it to Chanel, but it's just a skateboarding brand. It's not like couture." I said, "It's not just a skateboarding brand. Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons design stuff for them, and they just sell it for the same price as the rest of the stuff, even though it's worth like thousands of dollars. They sold Damien Hirst skateboard decks for like $50 that are on eBay now for like $10,000. Sort of things like that. So it sounds, maybe that was like a very random part to read from.
Yeah, no, I get the sense. It is very much Patrick Bateman going on about Huey Lewis and the News, right? That's sort of...
Well, there's that, and it's just extremely comic, and part of it I think a lot of it is like auto-fictional, or maybe not even auto-fiction, maybe like more like a reality novel. But there's like a moment where the character sort of admits that he can't go into the New York store because the people that work there just kick him out because he wrote an online article about Supreme for the New Yorker, and the owner of Supreme read it and banned him from the store. And like David Shapiro did write an article on Supreme for the New Yorker online, and sort of was also, I don't know if he really was banned, but I think possibly. Well, David Shapiro was actually famous. Do you remember years ago, there was a really, really famous Tumblr that was Pitchfork reviews?
No, I don't remember that. But like that sounds similar to some troll idea that I had, which was to review film reviewers. But yeah. Go on.
Essentially that's what he sort of did. So every day he would be uploading like one, sometimes 2, 3 reviews of Pitchfork reviews. So he would just go through them, reviewing the style of the Pitchfork review, their sort of views, or all of these things. And it was so funny. And at the time it was really, it was kind of, he became, I guess, like a mini internet celebrity for a small period of time. But there's this like obsessive nature, which is, I don't know, but it's never boring. It's just a really fun novel that sort of moves really, really quickly. And maybe there's a thing too, which is like, maybe for some people it wouldn't be that exciting a novel. I remember Giancarlo used to have this thing that he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he sort of said that water's for everyone and he's not interested in publishing water. So his books would be really specific for certain people or have a certain style. And I guess David Shapiro's Supremacist is just the perfect book for me. Something I find really funny reading, say, like Welbeck novels, is the obsession with Mercure hotels. Like, it's really about the Mercure. He'll talk about other hotels, but it will always come back. They sort of appear in novel after novel. I think there's this stretch of Serotonin maybe where he's just sort of listing every hotel that still allows smoking inside the hotel and which Mercures don't and which do. It's just really... It's really, really funny. And it's not even probably meant to be funny. It's just interesting, I suppose.
Yeah. And his obsessions with like in almost every book he talks about like microwavable lean cuisines and stuff.
Yeah,
like
exactly. That. Yeah, no, exactly.
Whatever the French equivalent is.
And there's something with him too, because he's so his novels are so kind of connected with social developments and changes in say economic theories. Like it's almost always in it. Like, in Serotonin, the guy works for the UN, I believe, in some kind of agricultural capacity, but it's never sort of disconnected. Like, even where those microwavable meals are coming from is all sort of connected in space and time with like a greater system, which, maybe people do less now, or maybe, I don't know. But Supremacist has that level of detail. It's really fantastic.
This episode is all about obsession, so really good choice. I'll have to get that. So it's a supremacist.
Yes.
The supremacist or just supremacist?
Just supremacist.
Okay.
And the cover is a supreme fire hydrant. No, not fire hydrant. Fire extinguisher.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And the Truman Capote what was that again?
Music for Chameleons.
All right. Well, we got a couple for our listeners to go and check out, maybe. Anything more to say about either?
I think I'm good. Yeah,
Excellent.
I think I'm good.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and here we have a returning guest, probably the most guest spots, I think, for this podcast. I'm not sure. It's River. Hey, River.
Hey, Matt.
How you been? What you been up to since last we spoke?
Oh, I'm a certified blue check now. I got a big boy job in writing. I'm writing for Pirate Wires now. So yeah, everybody check me out there.
And you moved to Miami?
Miami, yeah.
Living the Golden Girls fantasy?
Do what? The Golden Girls fantasy? Yeah. Well, like, I'm in a very Jamaican neighborhood, so
yeah, man.
Yeah. Everybody's just smoking weed all the time. They can't drive. It's great.
Lots of talk of jar.
Yeah.
But anyway, so brought you on, just like my other guests, to give me something old, something new that you're really into. What would you like to start with?
Fuck it, let's start with new.
Oh, yes. You're actually the first person so far that I've recorded with who started with the new. What is the new?
Have nothing to do with each other. So.
That's great. That's fine.
Yeah, this was like kind of like a last minute sort of thing, because I was like, you like messaged me last night and I was like in the middle of writing an article and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And like this morning when I got up, Chris was like, what are you going to talk to Matt about in the podcast? I was like, I have no idea. And I like came up with it a couple hours before now. So we'll see how it goes.
Love it.
The thing I want to talk about that's new is the Banshees of Inisherin. Of Ed Sheeran, of Aunt Sheeran.
Banshees of Ed Sheeran, yeah. That's just Ed Sheeran's fans, isn't it?
Yeah.
Muling tweens and middle-aged women.
Yeah. I saw I remember, when it was about the one about the dead hooker or whatever. The A-Team or whatever. When that song first came out, I remember seeing like a hard plastic lunchbox with Ed Sheeran's face on it. And that when I was like, this is such a big win for ugly guys.
Yeah, he has a very wide hand, like a frying pan face.
Yeah, which so do I. So I mean, I'm also a brunette, so that, and I have a beard, so that goes a long way. But yeah, I'm just like, what is it? He's just kind of like this pudgy, like ginger, and like all these like preteen girls were like just salivating, and I was like, that's when I realized I was like, there's a big difference between women and gay men. Like, there's something psychological going on with women.
Are you one of these people who are prejudiced? Are you one of these people who's prejudiced against gingers? Because I don't mind a ginger.
No. I don't mind a ginger. I think that they're very much. It's hard to find a mid ginger. I'll say that. I think they tend to go very hard.
The ginger bell curve.
They're like the hottest person you've ever seen, or like, ooh, but
Some people are really racist against gingers, though. Like my friend who recently had a baby, and she was having the baby with a ginger man, like redheaded guy. Like she said she had all of these friends who were like, it could be ginger. I'm like, oh, all right, then maybe just leave it out in the woods to just die like the Spartans did. Like, what? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in Australia, I feel like maybe, it's just melanoma waiting to happen. But
exactly, yeah.
What were we saying?
Banshees of Inisherin.
And she's an Ed Sheeran. Oh, no, I was also saying that's why incels are wrong, too. Because I'm like, if Ed Sheeran can become a sex symbol,
you can really too, honey.
Yeah.
You can do it too.
You just need to pick up a guitar and sing a sad song.
You can be it if you can see it.
Exactly. Anyway, yeah, Banshees of Ed Sheeran. So
I know nothing about this movie other than no, I haven't seen it, other than just that it's Irish. Is this although I also know it's the same guy who did In Bruges, right?
And I know films. He did. Let's just Google.
Let's Google live.
He did 3 billboards, 12 billboards.
Oh yeah.
This is actually the first movie of his I'd watched. I hadn't watched the 3 billboards movie. It's been recommended to me multiple times, but I don't know. I feel like once you've seen like one, I'm like, okay, Frances McDormand. It's like you couldn't get Meryl, so. But
discount Meryl, cut rate Meryl.
She's a great actress, but she is a discount Meryl. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like Naomi Watts is the cut rate Cate Blanchett.
So true. Rachel Weisz, remember her? She was like the discount Angelina. Anyway, so yeah, Banshees of Inisherin. I went into it just because a friend of mine told me, he was like, this is great, you have to watch it. It's funny, but it's also like fucking sad. And I was like, But I was left with nothing to watch. I'd finished all my Family Guy episodes. So, like my brain was just smoothed over and I was like, okay, fine.
I didn't know you were a Family Guy guy. I thought that was Chris.
I got really into like all of Seth MacFarlane stuff because I'm like, this is like so great for if you just don't want to think.
Yeah.
Like it just washes over you and you're like, oh, it's kind of funny. Like, it's also fun to watch the old ones and see what people got away with.
Yeah.
Which was a lot. And anyway, so I'd finished Family Guy. I was like, you know what? I can have my vegetables. I'll watch a prestige movie. And so I put it on and it was amazing. It was the first film that I've seen in ages where I didn't feel lectured to, patronized, insulted. It was just great. It felt like I looked it up afterwards and I was like, this has to be like based on something or like, but it's not. It's a completely original screenplay. But it feels like almost like a Greek myth or something. Like I was like, oh, is this like a lesser known like Irish classic or something? Like it felt very literary, deep, but not in like a pretentious way, and also not in the sort of insulting way where like I felt like the director respected me as the viewer and wasn't just like, here's the themes, we're gonna make sure that you understand them because you're a little retard, which I call the Adam McKay effect. That fucking asshole. Like he is the most contemptuous filmmaker.
He's like if like The Guardian became self-aware and like made a film.
Yeah.
And
was like, we're gonna throw 2 jokes in and call it a comedy.
Yeah.
That might be good. But just awful. No one has less respect for the viewer. And okay, but this isn't about him, okay? This is about a great movie, The Banshees of Inisherin. It's a story about a guy who lives in a little island, played by Colin
Farrell.
I don't know why I said Firth, but Colin Farrell, who lives in a small island off the coast of Ireland. It's during the Irish Civil War, which you can sort of, but it never really like plays into that much. It's kind of just something that's like happening in the background. So he lives on this little island, and he goes to the pub every day, and he hangs out with this guy who's like a folk musician. And then he goes into the pub one day, and this guy is just like, "Have your beer over there." He's like, "What?" And the guy basically just says, "I don't want to be your friend anymore. I don't like you. I think you're dull." And he was like, "But you have to be my friend." And he's like freaking out because it's like a tiny island with like, I don't know, like a few hundred people on it or something. He's like the guy that he drinks with every day, and all of a sudden he has like nothing. Colin Farrell's character, he lives with his sister, their parents are dead, and he just like hangs out with his donkey all day. And he's just like, oh, he's just in a bad mood, and he keeps going back, and the guy's like, no, leave me alone. And eventually the guy says, okay, every time you talk to me, I'm going to cut off one of my fingers. And eventually he starts doing it. And by the end of the movie, he's just like missing a hand, almost like, or he's missing all of his fingers. He can barely play his like fiddle. There's this whole side thing with like this kind of retarded twink who's like being abused by his dad, who's like a cop, who he kind of becomes friends with, but Farrell's character kind of treats him like an asshole. And then in sort of in the background of all this, there's this old woman who's like literally like a banshee, but she just sort of sits back and observes and everything. And she's like, there's going to be 2 deaths by the end of, or there's going to be 2 deaths by whatever date on Inisherin, and her like prophecy comes to pass or whatever. And I won't explain how, because I want people to watch the movie. But it was so like original. It didn't feel derivative of anything like that I really ever seen before. I mean, you can see the inspiration of like sort of classical literature and stuff there, but it wasn't like, oh, I've heard this story before, or like I know what's going to happen, or like it just felt like, oh, somebody created something completely new. And I hadn't felt like that about really anything like film writing. Like I haven't really felt that way in a long time.
All right. Anything more to say about the Banshees of Ed Sheeran?
Just that people should watch it and just realize that as you're watching it, you are seeing something that is rare. Even if it's not necessarily the film for you, even if like the themes don't necessarily speak to you, like the main theme of like male loneliness, like that's something that I'm really interested in. That's something I've kind of like sort of written about in like various different ways and stuff. But like just the very fact that someone has created a story that is completely new and that can withstand the test of time in this era is something that should be applauded regardless.
All right, River, what do you got for me that's old? Old.
For old, we have the essays of Mark Simpson. I've got 2 different books of his.
Which one?
I actually have 3. One of them's on Kindle though, and I didn't look through notes for that one. But Anti-Gay and Metrosexy.
Yeah, I remember Anti-Gay. I actually cited that a lot in my dissertation when I did my master's.
Really?
Yeah.
What was it on?
It was on like Queer Film. So it was like talking about these films in the 90s that kind of responded to the AIDS crisis in a way, but they were different from gay films. So they were like, it wasn't about like domesticity and like, but it also wasn't always directly about AIDS. Like it wasn't like a tragic like guy dies of AIDS or whatever. They were like really experimental and psychedelic and wild. And so that's why I was kind of drew on a lot of Mark Simpson's stuff about like, the kind of mainstreaming of gayness and kind of juxtaposing it with these films, basically.
Was it hard for you to find the book in Australia?
No.
I'm asking this because when I bought Anti-Gay, it was only like $6, but there's literally one copy on Amazon. It is used. It has like this like paper. It's a hardcover, but it has like this. It looks like printed off of like a copier.
Oh, really?
Like an at-home copier. And it was like sold on Amazon by like a Salvation Army in San Francisco or something.
Yeah, I got mine from the university library, so I didn't buy it. But
really?
Yeah.
It seemed like kind of hard to find. They should reissue it because it's great. But yeah, Anti-Gay is actually not all of these, for the people at home, not all of these are Mark Simpson's essays. He was like the editor. Some of the essays are his, some of them are written by other people. And then Metro Sexy is, I think, like self-published, but it's a lot of his essays that he had published over the years after coining the term metrosexual, which he did in, I think it was The Guardian.
Remember metrosexuals?
Salon, actually. Yeah. I think, no, that's what I actually wanted to talk about is I think that the metrosexuals are still with us. I think that they have shifted and they've become the sort of like spiritual successors of the metrosexual are like Andrew Tate, BAP, these sort of guys who are like reactionaries, misogynistic, whatever. And it's like, I think a way of sort of, they've embraced the metrosexuality of it all, but people are like, oh, this is like kind of gay. And so like they really dig their heels in and they're like, would a gay guy be this misogynistic towards women? And it's like, yeah. But they, I think, are the spiritual successors to the metrosexual. I don't think the metrosexual died at all. I think that it's just like it maybe has slightly different. The metrosexual has evolved into these sort of like manosphere type characters where they, the idea is in order to become an alpha male or to become, an Ubermensch or, whatever the terminology they choose to use is, depending on the IQ level, is you have to have this like hard, like jock body, and you have to have like good clothes and like good cars and everything. And it's just everything that Mark Simpson describes in his essays about metrosexuals. It's all about like the fashion. It's all about the gym. It's all about the good, like the material possessions. And it's such a break from like traditional masculinity. But what's interesting about sort of like Tate and BAP and all of these sort of characters is that they've retconned the history of masculinity and said, no, actually, this is we the metrosexuals, even though they don't call themselves that like guys like us have always been like the alpha men, like the masculine strongmen society have always had six packs and Bugattis and Abercrombie Fitch catalogs in their bathroom, and it couldn't be further from the truth. But they made such a case for it by by bringing up these Greek statues that were made by faggots in the 1500s, and they're like, this is what men look like in ancient Greece. I'm like, no, that's what Michelangelo was beating off to. Like, this is a call boy. And so they've turned themselves into these, like the image of like a rent boy, and then claim that they're the successors to Bronze Age aristocrats, and it's insane. But I kind of I'm fascinated by it nonetheless.
It's funny how you say like the metrosexuals are still with us, and like I completely agree with you with that sort of corner of the manosphere or whatever. But also, I feel like a lot of it has dispersed more widely into the culture as well. Like just because, like even normal guys who aren't just into like being, escaping the longhouse and like building physique and stuff like that, even like a lot of. I sort of look at this from the marketing point of view to straight guys. Like there's a lot of male grooming stuff that just basically is marketed towards straight guys. And the way that it's marketed is not actually misogynistic. It's if anything, it's you do this to appeal to women sort of thing. Like, and that's why I find it kind of weird, because it's like there's all these men who are like changing their bodies, and like I'm constantly getting ads. It's probably because the algorithm can detect my level of body hair, but I'm constantly getting ads for like body hair removal thing. And the way that they're pitched is really interesting. It's like, shave your nuts so your lady likes it down there. And like what I find interesting about it is how like you're removing aspects of masculinity to appeal to women's idea of masculinity, which is not, women don't like men in that sense. Not, at least not like gay men. Like,
I've long contended that like most heterosexual women are not physically attracted to men.
No, yeah, it's true. Like some of them are. The dirty girls are. Like I know a few women who are, who have like gay male brains, but like it's really weird how all this, and like doing your eyebrows and like having a good haircut, and it's all for women. Like, but then it's interesting, you have the flip side of that with like Andrew Tate and stuff, where it's like it probably underneath it is for women, so you can get bitches or whatever, but it's also like there's a misogynist angle to it for some reason, just to give it an edge or something like that. I just find it weird how like this idea about metrosexuality, which started, I mean, it probably started from trying to appeal more to women, to not to be more like women, essentially, because that's like Marx's point, isn't it? It's that men start becoming overly concerned with their appearance in the way that women are sort of socialized to be, like.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think a broader theme in Metrosexy, at least, like not just of the sort of seminal Meet the Metrosexual article, but some of the other essays that are in here, which I'll go through in a minute. I think that it's basically like an examination of men after in a post-patriarchal culture. It's like you don't have these traditional markers of masculinity, which is basically just like being able to support a family.
Yeah.
So it has to become, it's basically like masculinity has become like commodified and like marketized. It's become a form of like drag. Like he wrote God, and now why am I forgetting the name of this book?
Didn't he write a book? He wrote a book called Male Impersonators, which sort of argues.
Yeah, Male Impersonators, which is all about like bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And he's like Arnold Schwarzenegger is like a drag queen. Basically, it's like art. And yeah, it's like he relates it back to gay men, because he was like, this is also how gay men view masculinity, and like have long before like this era, because they were sort of outsiders to traditional masculinity. So they had to sort of like try to emulate it to like appeal to like the sort of like sexual gay male gaze. It's like you had to become a vision of like a physical manifestation of masculinity, instead of like this sort of like social role of masculinity, which is kind of gone, I guess. I'm probably not putting that in the most articulate way like people should read the work, but I think that's basically what he's saying. You should talk to Mark, by the way. I actually, the way I met Mark Simpson, I'll get back to some of the stuff in a minute, but I just want to say, it's funny because he's become like such a inspirational figure in my life. And I actually met him, or I didn't exactly meet him, but I appeared on a podcast with him, and that's how I figured out who he was. Like, I had heard of metrosexuality, like I knew the term, but like I had never read that article. I, just like vaguely knew what the term meant. And I went on Off of Bunga Bunga, which is a podcast by like some British, I think one of them's Brazilian academics, sort of like a left-wing podcast about like populism, but they were doing something about gay politics. And like, I think the question was like, are gay politics dead? And so they had me on way back in the day when I was just writing for like Twink Rev and stuff. And they had me on with Mark Simpson. And I was like, who is this guy? And like, I was asking like the host, and they were like, oh, he coined the term metrosexual. I was like, oh, that's cool. And so we zoom in. Mark like can't get his camera to work or something, and he like can't see us, but he can hear us. So we just recorded the podcast like that. And the host was like going around introducing everybody. He was like, "This is River." I was like, "Hi, I'm the American one." And he was like, "I know, you're very loud." And he has like this charming like Geordie accent. I think it's Geordie. It's one of those like northern British accents that like only people in one town have or whatever. And he's just like a charming guy. He's like, in my mind, like one of the greatest essayists of his generation. And he just like follows me on Twitter and like comments under my posts sometimes, and it's kind of crazy.
Cute.
Yeah, I really, he's great. If anybody listening hasn't checked him out, like just Google his essays. They're amazing. But back to metrosexuality, or Metrosexy, which is the book that has the Meet the Metrosexual article and a bunch of others in it. He also has an essay called Hummersexuals, which he wrote after sort of like during like peak Iraq War, when the Hummer was introduced in the United States. And the Hummer was just this like, the sort of pitch was that it's like a tank. You know what I mean? It was like, it'll kill everyone else on the road, but like not you.
Yeah. It's like in those Christopher Nolan Batman movies, like the new Batmobile was a Hummer, basically. Like,
yeah, it was
the
like
big blocky thing.
It's like basically a military vehicle that you can drive around in as like a normal suburban American. And these sold like big. They were gas guzzlers too, and it was like, okay, like kick their ass, take their gas type thing, fuel your Hummer. And he is sort of like describing, it's called Hummersexuals, and he's describing this as sort of like the Hummersexual is sort of like adjacent to the metrosexual. It's the sort of guy who thinks like the metrosexual is a fag. And it says he, quote, of the metrosexual, quote, he thinks he reeks of heterosexuality, but he is blissfully unaware that he often seems to have just stepped out of the funkier type of gay leather / bear bar. And I know exactly what he's talking about. Like, I mean, I was like pretty young when all this was going on, but like, I mean, this type of guy is also still with us. It's like the guy who like wasn't in the military, but like wears like U.S. Marine Corps like T-shirts and shit.
Probably in a militia.
Yeah, and does like CrossFit and like drives. They don't drive Hummers anymore because I don't even think they make them, but they drive like, F-150s, even though they don't, live on a farm. and that sort of thing. And he just really has a keen eye for examining sort of like the fallout, like the crisis of like masculinity for like straight men, which I think like, and it doesn't feel like projecting. It's not like he's like saying like, oh, these guys are like secretly gay or something. Which I think a lot of like sort of worse gay writers have and would have done. He's saying like, no, this seems gay, but this is why. It's because like there is no, like everything is like masculinity has to be like constructed in the way that like gay guys have to construct masculinity, and like that's actually what's going on. But anyway, back to Mark Simpson. Anti-gay, his sort of introduction to, or not the preface, but the first essay in Anti-Gay called The Gay Dream Believer Inside the Gay Underwear Cult. Great, a master of titles. He describes like the process of coming out, which I think like at the time this was written, which was the 90s, was this 90? I think
it was late 90s.
96, the year I was born. You know, this was a sort of kind of new thing, and the way he talks about it as this sort of evangelical experience, I think it's interesting. He says, coming out is also a form of death, but a fabulous life-forming form of death, to be sure. To be reborn, you have to destroy the wrong person that existed before. So the out person now recalls that he knew that he was gay from the earliest age, before he encountered puberty, before he could walk, before the afterbirth was cold, etc., etc. Early playground friendships with members of the same sex are now seen for what they were, passionate gay attachments, which no one straight could have possibly entertained. On the other hand, any encounters with, interest in, or marriage to the opposite sex is now quite rightly seen as nothing more than an ill-judged attempt to satisfy one's peers, parents, guilt, false consciousness, or just sisterly feeling. You know the scenario. I thought I loved you, but I just envied your makeup skills. That's actually fucking true and like still relevant. And I don't know if maybe you can tell me this. I don't know if maybe my experience was different, but I never had like that moment where I was like there were times where I like tried to convince myself, I'm like, oh, I always knew, but like the truth is like I didn't. Like I really didn't know until I was like in my late teens probably that I was like attracted to men. It was like then there was a certain point in my life where I was like I actually kind of did this like back and forth with bisexuality thing where I was like I am, and then there was like a period in my early 20s where I was like no, I was not. That was just like I was just like performing or whatever, and then like I became single again and like it's like a woman again, and I was like, oh wait, no, I do actually like this. Why would I do it again if I didn't? And like it was like, okay, so wait, like this isn't, at least for me, it wasn't something that like I could trace back to like early childhood. And I also wasn't one of these like guys who was like super girly, I guess. Like it's like a little kid, like I liked going outdoors. I like, you know, riding horses and like hanging out with animals and like being outside and like fishing and like all these like little redneck boy things. And then I don't know, turned 16, like started sucking dick. It was like, like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I like that the way he puts that, because it's like people look back on their life and recast it in light of the coming out sort of narrative. Whereas like you didn't think that when you were a kid. I don't think, I can only speak from my experience, but I didn't think that when I was a kid that like, oh, I love these boys, because I kind of hung out with both boys and girls and didn't really, it was just playtime. It wasn't like sexual. You only become aware of your sexuality when you become sexual, I think. And that's,
yeah,
I was exactly the same. Like I only sort of realized that when I started going through puberty, and it was just like, boys make me horny.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to say about Mark Simpson's works?
Only that people should read them. And they should also read his piece about the spornosexual, which is like the sort of
David Beckham.
David Beckham, and like basically the idea that like men are like basing their idea of masculinity off like sports and porn, which is definitely fucking true. Like more true now than probably when he wrote it. Just like as someone who writes essays for a living, I never expect them to be relevant in like 6 months. Like that's just like something that you have to like go into, is like, especially if you're writing about culture, it's like things can change like so quickly. So you never really know like how long things are going to last or how your work will hold up. And it's just, a lot of things don't hold up, but it's amazing to see like some things that were written in the 90s and early 2000s still be relevant today, and to also see how they've like morphed and like what their like sort of successors are, because like the things that he's just describing didn't go away. Like they changed, but like they're still with us.
Changed in weird and wonderful ways, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, River. This has been lovely.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we've got I guess we would call him a friend of the pod, and someone whose book we've actually done on the pod. A couple of episodes back, we did The Magpie Wing. We have Max Easton with us. Hello.
Hi, Matt. Good evening.
Thank you for being here. And like I said at the beginning, this is like a kind of compilation anthology episode where we will have past and future guests. So Max, you're committed to another appearance at some point. So
thanks for letting me know.
But you don't care. You want to be on.
I would love to. Yeah. I love your podcast. I listen to pretty much, I think, every episode.
Oh, thank you.
Good walking.
Yeah, very good. I love walking and podcasts. It's basically the only time I listen to them. I just can't. Yeah, I can't listen to podcasts in any other context. Maybe on a long drive, but mostly walking.
I think data entry, like big spreadsheets, and walking. Driving, yeah. Nothing, no other scenario.
Nothing else. Or washing the dishes, doing like housework and stuff.
Yeah. I've done like a lawn mowing podcast session.
Yep. Okay. Oh, while you were I thought you were like talking about a podcast about lawn mowing, which would be interesting. Could be.
There's a podcast for everything. I'm sure
there is. There is. So yeah, if you're unfamiliar with Max's work, you can go back to that episode. That's actually an episode that I'm not on. I think it's the only episode I'm not on. That's with Rio Rubin and our guest Liam. And they did a very kind of thorough analysis of Max's book, which Max seems happy with.
It was crazy. Like it had the book had a few different analyses which were really good and thorough, but not like that. Like it was pretty thrilling. Because when I wrote the book, I didn't think anyone would read it. Like in second and third drafts, I was like, I like this bit at the end, and I was trying to convince my editor to put it in the front because I didn't think anyone would get to the end and finish. So to like get to a point where people are picking up all these bits like and reading it more than once.
Wonderful.
Total thrill. Yeah.
What's the bit that you put at the front? Just the stuff about footy?
No, I think like, and it ended up being like kind of a needless detail in the end, but it was like a character formed a contemporary communist party of punk and like had a jam band, that sort of thing. Had this like political splinter group that he dissolved because he didn't like the music that ended up getting played like within the group. I was like, oh, I just like this idea. I like this one sentence. So I've got to like fast forward it by 25 years and stick it in the front so someone actually reads it. I don't know. Very neurotic writer and editor, I think.
Speaking of music, you play music too, don't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do, but so like on and off. It's been like we played music on the weekend for the first time in maybe pre-pandemic or between outbreaks sort of thing. That was really fun. But yeah, like lots of different punk bands over the years. Play drums and bass and guitar and
oh, he's a multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah, but but I could only play in those exact bands. Like the drumming style, which is just so thrown together, I couldn't play in any other band than that one. But yeah, so
it's hard, fast, and loud.
Yeah, or like loose, slow, and loud, dependent on the PA.
Well, I am kind of disappointed because the Italian club next door was playing like a whole heap of like pretty terrible renditions of some Italian pop songs, and I was wondering if it was going to be like the ambience for this episode.
I love that you live next to an Italian club.
Of course I do.
It's good for you.
Yeah. I never go in there though because I don't like paying the memberships and stuff. I like going into a place where you just go in. Like I hate membership places. Anyway.
Fuck clubs.
Yes. Okay, so Max, new or old first?
Maybe new because I can't decide on the old one yet.
Oh, we're still deciding. You're going to decide live what's going to be old.
Well, I was just like looking through my bookshelf and picked a new one from what I was going to do. So it's 2020. I think it's 2018, but it's 2021 in translation. So is that new enough?
That's all right. Some people have done way older for new so far. So
cool.
Yeah,
redefining the contemporary.
Yeah. So what is it?
It's Alberto Prinetti's Down and Out in England and Italy.
Okay.
And I don't know how I found it or picked it up, but it was on a whim. And I still haven't seen it really spoken about, so I thought it would be interesting to talk about.
So what's it? What's the vibe? What's it about? It's
kind of like it's sort of like a contemporary migration story of a factory worker from Tuscany, heading over to England for, glory, and kind of working in first, he's working in the back of a pizzeria, then he's cleaning toilets, and he's sort of, it's all, very focused on work and his struggle to kind of like, to me, it's really interesting to read stories of contemporary migration because I feel like so many migration stories are sort of, well, my grandparents migrated or they are set during the Great Migration, sort of mid-century type stuff. And this is sort of, it's embedded in this kind of, like, I'm not sure if it's post-Brexit or during Brexit. So there's this kind of threat hanging over him this whole time that, his visa may not be good for anything anyway. And, he's cleaning shit out of shopping center toilets with like bizarre, uncanny British people. And good culture clash and just really funny and really, a really nice naivety, which I think is in like lots of Italian in translation, like real direct, toying around with like a naive kind of narrator.
And it's an Italian book, obviously. Had you encountered the writer before?
No, and I don't know a lot about him, Alberto Prinetti, but yeah, I'm really glad I found the book. I read it in a day. It's only short. I think it's, look now. I think it's less than 200 pages sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah.
But I flew through it, and it was like one of those, in those reading stretches where you're reading all these books where you're like, I wish I knew what this person did for work. And then you just have a book which is all about what they're doing for work. Like it's, even if it's kind of relentless in that sense. But
that's a thing that I remember reading way back in the day when I read have you ever read Stephen King's On Writing?
No, I haven't.
He has this thing. He has this sort of section in it when he talked. Like lots of writers read this book, but clearly not all of them.
Well, I'm not a real writer.
But so I remember reading it, and one thing that sort of really struck me that was really true was that he talked about how like people love reading about work. Like it doesn't matter what the job is. Like if you go into detail about like anyone's job, and obviously do it a bit artfully, like people love it. They're gagging for it when you when you talk about work.
It's fascinating though, because it's this weird part of life that everyone statistically, I'd say, that everyone has to do at some point. And yeah, I think there's so much tension in the fact that this character is giving their life to something else. And then, like all the tensions are kind of self-evident. If just working a job is your device, like, does they want to do the job? Probably not. But yeah, and then I don't know. I agree with Stephen King.
So yeah, you don't have to read that book, by the way, because you already published a book, so you don't need to read it.
I've done it. Walk away now.
Yeah. So this character, how old is he? Is he sort of an older person or a younger man or what?
Good question. I think he's sort of early 20s.
Okay.
Because his dad does kind of drop him off or pick him up, or it's kind of like youth, but not youth.
So is it kind of like a sort of like a coming of age, or?
Well, yeah, no, because not, or maybe it sort of overlaps with a lot of those tropes, but there's not that kind of growth, which I really like in a coming of age novel, when it's it's kind of got the model is there, but they're not coming of age. And if anything, it's just kind of like let down and disappointed by the whole experience, which is like I love books. That's why I like like your podcast introduced me to Paul De La Rosa. I would never have read that book if it wasn't for like listening to him talk to you guys on that podcast episode. That's what I love so much about his writing is the disappointments of life.
The funny disappointments.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
They are hilarious.
Yeah.
I like the idea that that actually sounds kind of British, and it's like the Italian writer has internalized that British sort of sense of humor. It is funny, is it? Or
yeah. And sometimes in a schoolboy way, but like I laughed. Yeah, and I don't always laugh. Like I'll read and I'll be like, that is funny. I do that a lot.
No, it is very rare to like laugh out loud at a book. Like it's happened to me. It actually happened to me in Paul's book. Like
me too.
In multiple like sections. That's very rare for me. Like normally I'm the same. I'm just like, that's funny.
I appreciate the construction of that joke.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So do you have anything more to say about this one?
I actually don't have enough to say about it.
Don't you?
Other than that, like I don't know how I'd have never seen any conversation around the book.
Okay. Where'd you find it, by the way?
I can't remember. Like I really can't. It's just like one of those books that appeared.
Okay. And was it secondhand or new?
New.
Oh, okay.
I think I just bought it off the title too, which
I love doing that.
It's not even that good a title, but it was like,
No, I love doing that, and I think like people should do that more. Not only because like the don't feed the behemoth that's Amazon, but like also just like walk into a bookstore and just browse and like buy a book based on nothing, like based on the cover or the title. Or I love doing that.
Well, I'm not like I feel. It's almost like a spiritual thing. Like I get drawn to a title or a cover, or it just ends up in an op shop when I'm walking by. Like I always follow that. Excuse me. I always follow that chance or like instinct type thing.
Yeah. Anyone who says don't judge a book by its cover is wrong.
You got to judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Or by something superficial. And then something will jump out at you, you know? And
it's like it's the world's talking to you.
Yes, exactly. All right. Shall we move on to your old then?
Yeah. I was going to
Have you decided yet?
Well, I have now after that conversation. Like I was going to do Doris Lessing's The Good Terrorist because I've been referring to it a lot and I've been rereading it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember why. But instead, there's a book I found on the street, which is Pasolini's A Violent Life.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'd had that in a to-read list for a long time. I think I just read it on some like Marxist Italian books list. And I was like, oh, that one, I'll try that. But yeah, it was just literally not even in a street library. It was in a pile of shit being like thrown out to the tip. And it's a really nice edition.
Some anarchist punk flop house. Like they all moved out, did the bond clean, and they just dumped it all on the nature strip.
Or like someone got a good job and but it's not at all. Like it's you know, it's about I think it was written in late 50s.
Are these is these poems or are they prose?
It's prose.
Okay.
And it's not very good prose. Like it's quite clunky and it's actually how I write. Which is why like I kind of read it, it's like, I don't have to improve. If Pasolini can do it, I can do it. But it's like it's about
aim for the gutter, Max.
That's right. I've been doing that my whole life and failing. Succeed. But yeah, it's like all these. It's kind of like Roman gutter trash. You know, as the 60s are dawning, and there's, you know, it's obviously dated very poorly, but really interesting because when I went to Rome, I didn't really think much of it other than, you know, wow, historical.
Yeah.
But it gave such a nice flavor to all these neighborhoods, and you know, like all these kids have nicknames, and in a really interesting time in Italian history.
I actually, because I like to, when I go to a city, I like to sort of walk around aimlessly.
Me too.
And I did like go to a few of the surrounding neighborhoods, and it was really interesting. I actually saw there was some graffiti of Pasolini actually in one of these places that was really, really beautiful. And I forget the passage. It was like from his poetry, I think. It was just like a portrait of him with his poetry next to him. And yeah, that was really, really cool. Like, yeah, you think Rome is all Colosseum and all of that stuff, but you know, obviously it's an obvious point that like there's those neighborhoods there that are kind of more modern and have the same kind of issues as every other modern city, right?
Yeah, and tourist cities, maybe European tourist cities in particular, I feel like have this.
Is there any other kind?
Yeah.
Especially in Italy.
Yeah. But yeah, they have that. They do have that interesting contradiction of like, go see the Colosseum, but I did. I don't even know if I liked the book that much, but it was just one of those things that kind of like popped out to me, and I sat there and read it and lived within it. And I really like novels that end up being documents, even though it's not very literary. But for, you know, Pasolini in this book, he's kind of like outlining these sort of crooks, like Roman crooks, and you know, all their schemes. There was scheming, and there's violence, and there's like kind of horror in there, and police violence, and all this kind of agitation. And Pasolini ends up getting killed more or less by someone who like represents this upbringing that he wrote in his novel. So it's just kind of like got this extra element that he ends up on the beach in Ostia, you know, 20 years later fighting with some kid and gets killed.
Yeah.
And the kid's biography is more or less the characters in the book.
Yeah. That's That's interesting too. Is there like gay shit in that book?
Heaps of homophobia, which
not like gay stuff.
No. I mean, like, I think, yeah, no, like a guy gets jacked off in a cinema sort of thing.
Okay.
but it's just really horrid homophobia.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that he chose to like take a snapshot of that rather than a snapshot of, I guess, like underground homosexuality.
Yeah, well, he's done it in other contexts, I guess. But the thing that's interesting about him is that he's very similar to like Jean Genet, where like homosexuality is like of a piece with criminality, because they were both fascinated by both, and like how they, for them, I guess because of society at the time, they were both the same thing. But how they kind of marry those two things, like it's about deviance, I guess, and that's what makes him interesting when he's talking about like homosexuality, both of them actually, because it's that kind of deviant criminal element of it that I think is really interesting. You won't find that now.
No, it's not a crime, Matt.
Yeah, I wish it was though. It'd be more edgy. Yeah, so what when you said you lived within it, what does that mean to you? Like, what does it mean to live within something?
I think there's a number of books where the imagery is very vivid and I can see it, and I don't even have to like the book, but it's sort of it makes the book special to me regardless. Like, you know, this book kind of like rabbits on and on and on and on, and it's sort of like things happen, but like I struggle to kind of, it's not very satisfying and the threads aren't weaving together very well. But every scene is like very, very vivid, and I can picture everyone in it. I can picture the place, and I'm very there and I'm very present. And which is, you know, in your day-to-day life now, I feel is very rare. Like I find it difficult to be transported away from my own head.
What do you mean by every scene is vivid, but yet like the threads don't kind of cohere?
You know, and in newer books, I hate this. It's like something's happening and it doesn't need to happen. You get to the end of the book and it didn't have to happen. But if I feel like I'm living in the room, or if I feel like a part of the book, and I think a lot of it too is like the book there's one main character, but there are so many other people coming and going and moving where it's always in packs. Like there's packs cramming into a car and they're going to like steal some chickens, or they're going to like fuck with the church, or they're going to like, you know, help their friend serenade the woman to get married. Sì, ragazzi. Yeah, it's like this like movement, and like it feels like you're in the car with them. That kind of thing. So it feels like you're in the piazza, and I really like that. And I feel like it's kind of sometimes lost, like that a lost skill to drag people into a book. Yeah,
and sort of anchor them to it, right? Like,
yeah.
That is.
It's like consciousness of the reader, which I think is almost these days treated as a no-no. That you know, like the reader doesn't exist. You write your piece of art, and they will come or they won't. But I love this kind of book. Is like, no, the reader's here, and I'm telling them a story, and
I like that and actually I've been doing that more in my own writing, like that, considering like the narrator is there with the reader, if that makes sense. Like, or like, because in a lot of contemporary fiction, it's like the narrator just has to be invisible, like, especially if it's third person. But even in third person, I feel like you should make the narrator a character. Like, it makes it more interesting, and it also makes it easier to write.
Like, it makes it easier to write. It makes it easier to read.
Yeah,
and you can fuck with the reader. And if you want to,
yeah.
But you know, like,
I want to.
You can play tricks on the reader if you're aware they're there, and if you're trying to be, which I think is a very studied thing, like if you're trying to not do that and just make your work. Yeah, I mean, you can tell readers things and then not tell them things, obviously. You can turn on them when you want to turn on them. And
this is what I like about, and I think I've spoken about this before on the podcast, like briefly. This is what I like about Alan Hollinghurst's second book, The Spell, which every fucking critic hated. But I love it because it's like his most explicitly, well, not explicitly, but most gay. Like it's just to do with gay men and nothing else.
Yeah.
Like gay men hanging around and like cavorting at a country house and stuff and being absolute menaces. But the thing about it, the way that it's narrated is that it's like some gossiping queen. Like now just between you and me, I don't know why I just went Jewish there, but like it's that sort of like cattiness, you know?
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, but I think it's in third person, but it's still got that like, and Larry Kramer does that too in Faggots. Like it's that sort of, the narrator is a character too, like, and bringing that forward is really good and kind of, it situates the reader. And maybe that's what you're talking about when you're saying you kind of, what did you say? What was the term? Like lived in it, like that sort of.
Yeah. I really like that. And I don't know. I don't know why it feels rare now. I don't know. I haven't been to like a writing school or anything, but it feels like it's just not done, or at least not done enough or maybe it seems too simple or straightforward or something. Yeah, I love that shit.
Yeah, me too. I
love movies that do that shit, and I love like even songs. Like I'm like a massive Randy Newman fan because all these songs are just like talking to you and then turning or not turning. And
you should listen to my friend Dean, who I had on a couple of episodes ago. Like he's like a country crazy Randy Newman kind of guy.
Oh, really? I haven't listened to that episode yet.
Yeah. He often goes goblin mode, as we discuss in the episode, but his music's really cool. Okay. Anything more to say about Pasolini?
No.
You seen his other stuff, his movies?
No, not really.
You should check out his movies.
I've seen a couple. I think that's but I can't remember what.
There's
was Roma an Open City Pasolini?
No, that's what's his name? I forget. One of the neorealists. I can't remember his name.
I'm a bad Italian.
So am I. I know, but Pasolini, you know, the famous one is Salo, 120 Days of Sodom.
Yeah.
Which is like got coprophilia and like really explicit fucking violence and sex. It's a good time. But I really like Teorema. It's really good. It's like this guy turns up to this family. Just this mysterious guy wanders into a house and then seduces the entire family one by one. Men, women, the kids. It's amazing.
What a beautiful story.
And then just leaves, and then like the whole family is sort of left with like wondering what the fuck happened. So good. Anyway, Max, thank you for sharing your old and new passions with us.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for running a great podcast now on your own.
Oh, thank you. And now I am joined by someone who I really enjoy their presence online. You are a great poster and an associate editor for Hobart Literary Magazine or Journal. What's the official title? Hobart?
Just Hobart, I think.
Okay. It is Miss Unity. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Elizabeth Ellens Hobart, I should say.
Elizabeth Ellens Hobart. Okay. Yeah. We won't talk too much about that whole thing because I think that's been rehashed.
Thank you.
But yeah, I really like your presence. Like you always make me laugh. Like your posting style is hilarious, but you're also a great writer. Very rarely do you get those two things in the same person. There's always like great posters that don't really write that much, or great writers who don't really post, or they post in a really kind of shitty way. Like
Right.
All about shilling and promo. Yeah.
Almost as if we only have enough time or space in our brains to develop one of those skills at a time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think one of my favorite posts of yours when you were basically promoting Donald Goines with your cock and balls. That was great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, just I don't know. I had a little fit of inspiration there.
Yeah, and yeah, your essay on detransitioning was really great. I've actually said it on one of my courses. You might be pleased to know. So
wow.
It'll be interesting to see how the students react to it.
Wow, that is happens. So flattering and exciting. I had no idea that it was really like reaching that far.
Yeah, so but yeah, this element of like being a great poster and being a great writer, it's very rare, and you should be proud, Miss Unity.
Thank you. I'm very proud.
Okay. So what would you like to start with today? The new or the old that you're going to sort of recommend to me?
I guess we'll go chronological and we'll start with old.
Let's do it.
Okay. So the thing that I brought to show you that is old is Bleak House by Charles Dickens.
Yes. All right.
You a Dickens fan?
I love Dickens. I love the stuff that most people don't like. So my favorite Dickens is Our Mutual Friend. You read that one?
Somebody else was just saying that was their favorite, and it's like the one of his later big ones that I have not read.
Yeah.
But they were saying it's like that was apparently someone else's favorite too.
It's really sprawling and has like 100 characters. It's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I love about Bleak House and about all those later Dickens novels is it's sort of like accretive and like agglutinative almost in terms of their characters and situations and settings just start adding to themselves like a snowball rolling down a mountain or something, and you just get. But by the time you're sucked into the book, you feel like there's no way it could ever end because like the entire world is going to become part of this book or something.
Do you know about the publication history? Was Bleak House one of these serialized ones?
It was published 1852 to 3. I don't know if it might have been published in Household Words, which was the periodical that Dickens started. I'm not sure, but yeah, it would have come out over about 2 years, and every month or so you would get like 3 chapters or something like that.
Do you think there's something about
just also so ballsy? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there's something about serialization that like sort of causes that accretive sort of stuff that you're talking about?
Yeah, probably because he was probably being paid by the word. Although I just read something that said he made more money doing his public performances. By the end, he was getting more income from ticket sales to his shows, which were like, one of the first, probably like, he was the first like rock star kind of.
Yeah. He must have been a great performer then. Like,
yeah, I read I read that it was really amazing.
I heard it from someone who was there.
Yeah, my boy Mark Twain was telling me it was just hypnotizing.
Yeah. Did you see that photo going around of Mark Twain with his shirt off?
Oh yeah, some people seem to really like that.
Yeah, I don't know if that was colorized or not, but it looked like it was because it looked a bit fake. But yeah,
I probably it's a wood.
Yeah, it's a wood. Okay, yeah. So Bleak House. I actually haven't read Bleak House. What's the sort of, how would you sum it up?
Well, there's like, it's been so long since I read it. There's sort of there's a court case at the center, Jarndyce and Jarndyce, which has to do with like contested wills. The main character is named Esther Summerson, and she's a ward of the court, and so she's sort of getting sucked into this court case along with a billion other characters. It's really interesting because it's written in 2 different perspectives. So you'll get 3 chapters that are written from the perspective of Esther, the narrator, and then 3 chapters that are written from like an omniscient perspective. And there's like obviously like a million subplots. The main story, I don't even know if there is a main story. She's like, she's just kind of like existing and going around in London, and there's a lot of fog and mud everywhere. And there's a detective story at one point. One of the characters, Lady Deadlock, who's played by Gillian Anderson in the miniseries, there's like a mystery of parentage, and there's a lot of other mysteries.
Very Dickensian.
Okay, I'm doing a terrible job summarizing the plot.
No, it's great. I also love the name Lady Deadlock.
Oh yeah,
that sounds so metal.
It's like apparently what the first recorded use of the word boredom.
Oh really?
Yeah, used to describe Lady Deadlock.
That she was bored.
Yeah, she was bored. He didn't invent the word, I don't think, but it's like the first time that it's written down or published.
Okay. Yeah. So it's sort of like a apotheosis of Dickens. Like you've got the detective stories, you've got like the London grime and sleet and all that sort of shit. And lots and lots of characters. I love that. So what is it, this sort of like expansiveness that like really does it for you, or like what is it? What's the main ingredient, you think?
Yeah. That expansiveness, that if you think of a novel as something that's like approaching some sort of representation of totality of a universe, of an entire world, like this is that. And it is big and messy and ramshackle, just like real life is. It has all of the one thing I was remembering thinking about is like, how all the sort of side characters in Dickens are these always like, they seem to be these over the top, like grotesque caricatures. And of course that's like so much of the fun and pleasure in reading Dickens. But one of the things I always remember reading this is like, you start realizing that like people in real life are like that, and like he's actually just describing the way that people actually are and look like, but we're so like just accustomed to seeing people and being like, that's just a person, and not really thinking about how people are so like strange looking and have such odd, personal and physical characteristics.
Yeah, I love that sort of detail that he goes into, like when he's describing someone, and it even extends to like the way that this is often remarked upon, like how he names people. Like the names are always just so fitting. Like
the name goes with the face, and the face goes with the personality, which is like kind of true, In here we have like there's a Mr. Voles who looks like a rodent, I think. There's like a Mr. Guppy. There's a Tulkinghorn who's like a menacing lawyer. There's a Mr. Bucket who's a detective. And it's one of the first Mr. Bucket. He's one of the first detectives too, if I remember correctly. There's a and you get every single social strata, you get the lords and ladies, you get the middle class people, you get the chimney sweeps, you get, poverty stricken, tuberculosis, smallpox ridden, you get dogs, you get like, you just get everything.
Yeah. And I guess that's what you were saying before, like it's kind of like a life world, right? That he sort of, kind of manifests in a way in a lot of his books.
I obviously I didn't have time to like reread the whole thing in preparation for this, but I've been thinking somewhat about like, I studied Victorian literature in graduate school, and I just always remember like in our seminars, we would always get to a point with Dickens where, he's such a savage social critic, and it extends to everything. It extends to institutions, and it extends to individuals, and it extends to the constricted role of women in society and all these things. And I remember being in seminars, and just we'd always get to a point with Dickens where you say, like, well, he's got all these criticisms, but he doesn't go far enough because he doesn't like call for a revolution or something. And I think like something that I thought about in the interim, and this is why I would be really interested in like rereading these again, is how like it actually is like his solution to everything is completely baked into these novels, because you always end up like back at home at the end. And I think there's such a profound lesson there, taking care of the people around you, taking care of yourself. And I think that he truly believes in the magic of the home. And that I think he truly believes that everything in society could transform if you begin there. And I really love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that too. Okay. So should we move on to the new?
Yeah, sure.
I'm very interested to see what you've chosen for the new, because as we were discussing before I started recording, we're both like more, into the old. It sounds like, but what do you got for me?
Yeah. So, well, in the past couple of years, I've been, kind of immersed in this world of independent publishing. And so I have a lot of stuff floating around in my head, and there's a lot of good stuff out there, and there's a lot of decent stuff out there. But I think the one thing that I read in the past couple of years that I would really make a case that it belongs like in the pantheon is Ruthless Little Things by Elizabeth Victoria Aldrich. Really probably could not get more diametrically opposed to the Dickens novel. This is like, have you read this?
No, I haven't.
Well, so this is, it's, I guess you could kind of say it's a drug novel, although it's very experimental and hybrid. And I don't know if I would even say it's a novel. Reading it, the experience of reading it is kind of like, somewhere between like experiencing waves of nausea and like the experience of rolling on ecstasy.
Oh, God.
It's a book that will this is a book that will burn a hole in you like a cigarette that's been left lit after you're passed out at a party or something. It's like a Courtney Love song, maybe filtered through a Greg Araki movie or something.
Okay.
So
it's very 90s.
There's a kind of 90s grunge, like Southern California sensibility to it. It's a lot of lesbian sex and shooting up and like driving around on highways. There are sections that are poetry and sections that are prose. I was reading it again over the weekend, and there were things that were sort of clicking into place more than when I read it the first time, because it's kind of formally experimental. There are multiple narrators that sort of, like I said, it's kind of like a rolling experience of reading it. Like it's sort of like kaleidoscopic experience where one narrator sort of gives way to the next, although it seems like most of the speakers or the voices maybe are versions of the author, possibly.
Just sort of like what's that Faulkner book, As I Lay Dying, where like each chapter is a progressive sort of different narrator.
Or like I also was thinking of like I think that Virginia Woolf book, The Waves, has like that like multiple narrators that sort of bleed into one another.
And is it like is it sort of more experimental where like they don't have much to do with each other, or is it like a kind of cohesive narrative that like builds on each narrator?
Yeah, kind of both and either at different times. Okay. There are times when like in the middle of a scene it sort of shifts to a different narrator, and then times when it just sort of cuts in very abruptly to a totally different scenario.
So how'd you come across this?
Well, this was like one of the first things that I read when I was getting into writing and getting into literature. I mean, independent literature. Like I got on Twitter in the end of 2020, and because I'd been like sort of writing and submitting things and not knowing what I was doing and sending things to like Plowshares. And, you know, I didn't even know like that this whole world of like online writing existed. And as soon as I got on Twitter, it was like I became acquainted with like Expat Press and Hobart and so forth. This is like one of the first books that I got from Expat, and Elizabeth was one of the first friends that I made on Twitter. And it was like discovering the Expat books. It was like it was just magical. It was like turning the key in a chest of forbidden pleasures and knowledge or something like that.
Yeah, I love what they do.
Yeah,
and I love the online version too. Not just because they publish me online, but also like I just love it. Like I just love they're really good. Not that this should matter that much, but they're really good at the social media kind of stuff too. Like just being present, but not in a cringe way, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't know that was Expat Press actually. So yeah, that's cool.
Really highly recommended.
Awesome. Well, we got you. If you're a big fan of Expat Press, what else would you recommend from them? We'll give them a
well, I love anything by James Newlick. The Moon Down to Earth is really, really, really special. Oh my gosh, what else from Expat? They should have a list of like the other books in here. I have like so many of them, and of course I'm blanking. Expat Press. It's like I've never even heard of them before.
Oh, Donald Goines, obviously, you felt it was good enough to...
Yeah, Donald Goines by Calvin Westra. It's like I've heard that title so many times that it has like actually left my brain.
Yes, yeah. Like, it's like that scene in Being John Malkovich where he jumps into his own head and just all you hear is Malkovich is like Donald Goines.
Right. Well, with the thing is, it's like with independent authors where it's like you have to do all of your own press and like you basically have to make your book into a meme in order to sell it, you know?
Pretty much, yeah. All right. Did you have anything else to say about what was the title of this one? Sorry, I blanked on it.
It's called Ruthless Little Things.
Yeah. Did you have anything else to say about that one?
It's just, I mean, it's one of the purest distillations, I think, of the creative spirit of a person who like was just, you know, Elizabeth passed away last year, and I'm sure that she experienced a lot of suffering and pain, but when I think of her and I think of her dying and living, I just think this is someone who was not long for this world because of how much she loved life and how much she took out of it, and I think she just was the kind of person who lived every single, like, wanted to experience every single experience that life had to offer to the absolute fullest. And it is completely and totally captured in this book. And I really think I do think that it's a masterpiece.
Amazing. High praise. I'll have to get it.
Yeah. Get it.
I will. I'll get it. I'll get it, girl. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your old and your new. I'm actually very happy that I've gone through this experience and we haven't got any repeats. So we've got a good amount of things that people can go and research. Thank you for your time, Miss Unity. And I will see you around, I guess.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about the 90s. So, you and I are basically the same age. And so there's a small window, which is basically post Cold War, pre-September 11, early internet. It's like this sweet spot that those of us who are around our age got to experience, especially if we were early adopters of the internet too. And we were
As we both were.
Yeah, we're these nerdy people, hanging out in chat rooms or whatever, just
MySpace, MSN, ICQ.
All of that. And just and how amazing it is to have grown up in some suburban Australian city, which was really felt so distant in a way that I just don't think young people understand now, because I've been thinking about this, but I just read a novel that's done quite well recently, and it's set in 1996, and the teenagers are so woke, they can all talk about colonialism and intergenerational trauma. And
yeah. Colonialism didn't exist until 2011.
Well, I mean,
in the sense of people talking about it,
Yeah. Well, no, the thing is, because the novel is set basically in the area that I grew up in, or not far away, and it's the Vietnamese community essentially.
Oh, I know what novel you're talking about.
I'm probably giving it away now. Look, I don't want to criticize too much. I mean, it's did a pretty decent job overall, and maybe other readers might not be as bothered by this as me, but it did bug me, thinking about the 90s. And because in 1996 I was about 15, and I remember that time pretty well, because I feel like that's the time where I really kind of started to really grow up. 15, because that's and it coincides with the internet and all of that too. So, and I was a nerd who basically hung out at the library and read books, and I'm reading these characters who are high school dropouts, and they seem to be so much more knowledgeable than I was at that age. And I'm but I was an uber nerd. How can they know about this stuff? So it's really imposed with I guess contemporary thinking about race politics for one thing. And so that's what I mean. Just feels so inaccurate the way the characters speak. But perhaps it's forgivable in the context of the whole story. But it just makes me think about, I think people really can't imagine what it was like to be a teenager at that time now, and just how far away Australia was, how incredible the internet was for opening up, your world, that you could be at the school library, which we try and block Yahoo chat or whatever ICQ program but some of us were super keen to talk to people in the US or in other countries. But I think it's really hard to imagine this now, because people have grown up with the internet. They can't imagine how slow life was back then.
Yeah, people don't realize how cool it was. One of my really good friends that I made, who I never actually got to meet, but I was going to meet, because this was when I was almost going to go teach English in Japan after I finished uni, or my first degree anyway. And he was American, but he was living in Japan doing the JET program, and we kind of met each other at on this online writing workshop. So we used to write and exchange notes on our stories and stuff like that. And it was really cute. And then that developed into a thing where we just constantly kind of talked every night on MSN, just chatting away about this, that, and the other. And this is so normal now. It's something that everyone does everywhere, essentially. But it was groundbreaking to be able to not only talk to someone who was from another country, but who was living in another country as well. And it kind of helped because Japan's in a similar time zone, so it wasn't always random communications at all different times of the day. But it was also just yeah, it was people don't realize how like amazing this was, like that growing up and that having that suddenly, because it did happen very suddenly. Like it was just like, wow, the world is open to us, you know?
No, it was incredible, and it's hard to explain. I mean, and I I've talked about this before because I feel like it could be written about a little bit more than what it is. Because there's only like probably a subset of us who really can articulate this. But I mean, but even when I think back, I still find it incredible because like, so around that time, it would have been around 1996, 97. I met a girl through one of the IRC chat rooms one night randomly. Then then she messaged me kind of like the private, what would have been like the private messaging kind of system then. And then we connected, and then she was living in the Philippines, and we would talk on the phone, like we were like internet friends, right? And I didn't realize how wealthy she actually was, but she would buy stuff from Amazon. So like I was getting packages from Amazon in the 90s. So this is like really early on. And she would buy me CDs and books. Like I remember she bought me like Neil Gaiman books because she was a big fan. And that was how I heard about Neil Gaiman back then. And Lilith Fair CDs. She was like really into the Lilith Fair. And no joke, this woman is basically from a billionaire family. I'm not even exaggerating. I've looked her up since. And I met her. I actually ended up meeting her in Sydney. When was this? Would have been about 15 years ago. Yeah, her family own literal shopping malls in the Philippines and are like one of the wealthiest families. But yeah, but she was like a random internet friend. But lots of weird things like that happen on the internet too, which like is mind blowing. Even this other chick, like I met on a message board. We ended up in a private conversation as well. But yeah, she turned out to be like this touring musician from Mexico. She came to Sydney, and then I went and saw her at the basement. And like she was legit, like she had signed to her debut album was signed to Mushroom Records here, and I literally just had started talking to her around me on the internet. So that kind of stuff really makes me nostalgic for early internet and how incredible those connections were, and for opening up the world, and how it now, I mean, of course it still happens now, but it's just there's just so much noise and so much kind of toxicity otherwise.
Yeah. And it was all really kind of, yeah, like I said, it was all really sudden, but it's all a very particular time. Like it's a very kind of there's a sort of cutoff age, I think. It's like those of us in our early 40s till about mid 30s, kind of, it's that sort of age range. Like they got it because it was that suddenly you could just talk to anyone anywhere around about the same age or a little bit older or a bit younger. And like it was just, especially if you were a bit of a loner or a nerd or like it was such a salve, Yeah,
well, a lot of us couldn't find friends who like got us in real life, like because you end up in high school and then you don't connect with the people around you. And I don't know, I just felt like I was, but it was hard to explain to people because it just sounded weird and like geeky, of course, because it was like, how else could you explain this? Like,
well, it was like, I remember when like internet dating and like talking to people on the internet and meeting and making friends on the internet was a weird thing. Like now it's completely normalized, all of those things. But it used to be weird. It used to be fucking weird.
No, it did. Well, I mean, but I met my now husband, also on early RSVP in 2008. And that was also like a bit weird and shameful back then. And that was, and by then it wasn't even like a new concept, but they had managed to probably be the most successful in the Australian market, right?
Did you do the fake story? Oh, friend of friends. We met through a friend of friends.
Oh, I didn't because I had owned it, but my husband definitely did that. Like he found it really weird and shameful because he's like an early internet geek as well, but in a different way, but an antisocial one. So he was hanging out in bulletin boards like from the 90s, like doing bootleg trades and stuff, that kind of stuff. Whereas I was from the early 90s, like mid 90s, like just chatting to randoms. So I didn't find it, I kind of had owned it a long time ago that this was just my weird life that I couldn't explain to people. But the reason why I'm mentioning all this too is it makes me think like if any young person now wants to write about the 90s and understand a bit better what it was actually like, they should watch something like The Simpsons because I've been revisiting The Simpsons and then watching a couple of these episodes. I don't know which season it is, but they're from around 1997, 98. And so honestly, like it brought me back to myself because I'd kind of forgotten just how obsessed I was as well. Like, I don't know if you were one of these people too, but I could literally quote verbatim like whole entire episodes. Like,
me too. Yeah.
That's how geeky it was. Yeah. But it wasn't just me. And in fact, it was less geeky to love The Simpsons because it was pretty mainstream. Like, I had like entire friendships in high school which were based on mutual love of The Simpsons, and we could just spend all day talking about The Simpsons. But watching again reminded me, like, that's what the 90s of that period was like, 1996. Like, you need to watch the sitcoms of that year to understand, you know, what the mood was, and even though these were American sitcoms, I definitely felt like they really influenced us here as well, because we all had this kind of longing to, like, you know, be a bit more American, because it was just lame being an Aussie. Like, who wants to be Australian? It was just fucking lame.
By the way, we've already just got straight into this, and I haven't even introed you. This is Sheila Knock-Pham, everyone. She's been on a few episodes ago when we talked about They, and now we've just gotten straight into it. Maybe I don't. I like going straight into it, so I'll just put that there. I won't cut it and put it at the front. So so clearly your old text is going to be The Simpsons.
Yes. Just recently I've been kind of craving like older shows. So I mean, before The Simpsons though, like, watch a bit of Golden Girls. But I wasn't a fan of the Golden Girls at the time, because that's slightly before our time, I think. Really, like, in terms of when
I was, because my nonna was obsessed with it. She would always watch it because she identified with Sophia.
You know, it's such a forward thinking show. Obviously, it does feel, you can watch it now and appreciate it. But I didn't kind of finish the whole thing because there's just too many seasons. But you know, my husband and I, we ended up rewatching all of Frasier recently, and that is amazing, that show. Except I would say also, but at the time it wasn't my show either. I didn't watch this in the 90s when it came out. I was probably more like, you know, Seinfeld and The Simpsons. But yeah, The Simpsons anyway. So then I've come back to The Simpsons thinking, wait a second. In the 90s, wasn't that all I watched? Like, constantly would record it on VHS, rewatch episodes, quote them verbatim, like, and it formed such a big part of my sense of the world and my sense of humor and everything as well. And in a ways that I can't even explain to myself now, but I think if you get it, you get it. You know? Yeah. Or if you know, you know, as they say.
Like, the thing is that some people, I like how you say, you know, the quoting verbatim kind of nerdy, like, in thing about The Simpsons, because there's that sort of Simpsons fan, and then there's like the casual fan who, like, you know, likes it and likes the characters, thinks Homer's funny and blah, 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 blah. But like, I've been in so many social situations where I've just dropped a line from The Simpsons and like, but I haven't flagged that it's from The Simpsons, and people just think I'm hilarious because like not everyone remembers everything. Like, so I can just say something funny from The Simpsons and people are like, oh, that's really funny. I'm like, oh, thanks.
Yes,
it was my Wildian wit.
So I don't know. But maybe I happen to know lots of Simpsons fans at the time, but I mean, you know, these are like mostly kind of nerdy, geeky people, perhaps at high school. But it's true, probably plenty of other people at high school would have no idea, and it just wasn't for them at all. Whereas for me, like, I just felt really obsessed with it in a way that, like I said, I can't even explain now because I've not been obsessed with anything like that since, really. Not to the same extent where, like, I'm literally quoting lines, and even watching these episodes recently just comes back like these lines, and I can basically say, you know, as I'm watching it. And I guess because back then too, I guess people forget of TV how integral it was to, like, your life, that Simpsons was on every single day on TV. Plus, then you would record it with VHS so that you could rewatch it later.
And then it was repeated on TV too. Like,
and then it was repeated. And then they'd have Simpsons marathons and that, I think, even on free-to-air TV.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even thinking about it now, we lived through this time. It feels really weird and freaky thinking that that's what life used to be like. Because now, of course, there's no shared culture in the same way, not the same cultural. And that's sad, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously it was kind of inevitable because of the internet. But it just, you realize how nice it was in a way to have this kind of shared experience.
This is something that I experienced, like, I have experienced teaching Zoomers, because it's like, I have no cultural touchstone that I can use to, like, as an example. I can't be like, so you know that episode of The Simpsons, because they've never seen The Simpsons.
Whereas back then you could be, you know, it's pretty reliable that everyone would have seen an episode of Seinfeld or The Simpsons.
Or at least knew the character archetypes through osmosis or something. Like, but yeah, not anymore. So are you bringing to the table, like, specific episodes or seasons or something? Or,
well, I've only rewatched a few recently. I mean, I would love to rewatch it all from the beginning. But that's such a huge time commitment, which I don't
and
have.
It's not even finished. So
yeah, it's not even finished. But I guess I had a particular yearning for, I don't know, and actually it was my husband, I think, who picked, like, it was, now I can't think exactly what year it was, 1998, I think. But there was this really good episode which really stood up, and it was about when Homer joins the Movementarians.
The leader is good. The leader is good.
Yeah. No, the leader. But the whole thing is really funny because, I mean, I'm super interested in cults, like, you know, because they're just around everywhere. And I think about even, it's like my frame of reference for the world. Like when I see people get sucked into things like, you know, MLMs, they're cults. There was like a great podcast series a while back about an MLM in North America. And that was basically a cult as well. And just other kinds of stuff in the literary world, which I would also consider cults as well. And so watching
go back to our previous episode with Sheila for that one.
Well, there's that too. Yeah. But but it was a fun episode because it's clearly about I don't want to get sued, but about a very famous cult that I think, you know, lots of celebrities are part of, that we all know. But it wasn't just that. Like it's actually kind of another episode which probably connects to it in a different way. I wouldn't mind rewatching is the one about the Stonecutters, which is more about the Masons. But they're kind of related in a way, because in this one too, like the whole town of Springfield gets sucked in by the Movementarians. And the funny thing in that episode, which I kind of forgotten at the time, was just how unconvertible Homer was, because he was just so dim. He just like every trick that they tried didn't work. And I don't know that it's exactly resonant today exactly, but it's more that watching it was just hilarious for one thing. And I guess one thing though, watching it now, I definitely get jokes that I wouldn't have understood back then. And you realize just how sophisticated the writing is of The Simpsons, because, you know, I think it's kind of well known that the writers' room is just full of people with like PhD maths on other subjects and that. But it's just so many like throwaway lines where there's no way I would have understood that in 1998. But now I'm like, oh my God, that's hilarious. So I don't know. So I do recommend, if you haven't ever seen some of that season of The Simpsons around that era, and if you really do want an insight as to, I don't know, like I guess the tone of that era, and this is, like I said, it's a particularly small window of like pretty much about 10 years, right? And that's why, and the other, actually, and thinking about other old shows which I haven't revisited, but also another thing about the 90s, which you will remember too, but like, it was kind of an innocent time in some sense, because, you know, it was after the Cold War, and suddenly we had a lot of time to become obsessed with like UFOs, and you know, just like the X-Files and just like all this stuff now, which like, I don't know, I mean, it still lurks in the culture somewhere, but it's pretty peripheral now. But back then it was pretty central in the culture.
You could equally make the same points you're making about The Simpsons, about the X-Files, definitely. Like that was such a, like, that was so dominant. Like it was like Simpsons, X-Files, like that was the culture basically.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and there were other shows too, like that now that people still consider
Melrose Place.
Oh my God, Melrose Place. But that's probably even a bit slightly early. Oh yeah, it was around that time too, but even slightly before that. The other show, which I actually personally never got into, but I watched the first season when it came out, was Buffy.
Yes.
And obviously there's a lot devoted to that, but I just wasn't into the gothic, and I'm still not. It's not really my taste. But I definitely remember watching it as it was released, like Buffy. Like I watched all of the first season, and it didn't hook me in, so I didn't kind of continue. But I was obsessed with like, The Simpsons, especially X-Files. And I mean, I don't want to like, you know, nostalgize about the 90s, but I can't help it at the moment because I just see like maybe like how bad the internet is as a place and all that, and it makes me think how wonderful
versus what it used to be.
It was. Or the promise of the early internet, and also like you were saying too, like we experienced it firsthand as it was unfolding, and we made these incredible like connections. It really expanded our worlds from, you know, we were growing up in places that felt really distant from where the culture was
literally
being made.
Were very distant from where the culture was made. Like it's like a 15-hour flight.
Well, exactly. So I think the 90s, like I've been, and I guess it's partly just general nostalgia, but also but then even thinking about reading this recent novel and how it depicts 1996 in a way which I'm just like, I don't really feel like it was like that. But I mean, it's hard though writing historical fiction is difficult, but especially when you think about how quickly, like you said, things just change very suddenly, and then in a way that was just so unprecedented as well. I think that anyone growing up now just can't imagine that. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like the Industrial Revolution or something. It'd be like one day you're like, because I'm doing some writing at the moment, thinking about hand sewing, and thinking about when sewing machines came in, like that would have liberated like an entire generation of people, like not just sitting in the laboratory doing hand stitching. And the same thing, like now it's hard to imagine people spending 10 hours a day just hand stitching stuff, which is what I'm trying to do for this writing piece. But it just seems crazy to me because how it's just so inefficient. But yeah, I was thinking maybe that's what thinking about life before internet would be like for a lot of people as well. Unimaginable, basically.
Yeah. All right. Beautiful. What about, so that was your old, so what's your new sort of passion that you're bringing to the table?
Okay, so I do listen to a lot of podcasts. There was a time for the last few years where I didn't listen.
Is it our podcast?
Oh, no. Well, that'd be it's not quite as controversial as your podcast. I was going to nominate, and the podcast I wanted to talk about was The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. And it does relate to the even what I was saying before about my recommendation of The Simpsons. There's lots to say about this topic. I don't necessarily don't think I need to go into it too deeply, but just as a podcast, it's kind of episodic documentary style. I think it's really well done. It's hosted by a woman named Megan Phelps Roper, who was formerly of the Westboro Baptist Church. Her family are basically like the founders of it. So that was like that really famous hate-filled church, basically in America.
God hates fags.
Yes, it's them. Yeah, the God hates fags people. Actually, interestingly, social media is what opened up her world. It was Twitter. So she credits Twitter to basically, because she would be on, this is before when she was deep in it, and then she'd basically be on Twitter arguing with people. And eventually it kind of, as far as I understand from just reading briefly about her, it actually kind of cracked open something, and it actually helped her to deprogram and get out.
Did she meet a husband or something on Twitter?
She met a husband as well. So it's interesting though. So like this is like 10 years ago. So that was probably early Twitter, right? Less toxic as well. Because people, I wasn't one of those early adopters of Twitter because I was pretty wary of it from the beginning. I mean, of course I knew it when it was out, but a lot of people, I think what I was talking about with that kind of mid to late 90s internet, people have that same nostalgia for early Twitter. And they felt it was smaller, more community oriented, a bit friendlier, not the place it is now. To go back to Megan Phelps Roper, I think she had a pretty interesting premise for this podcast, which was basically that because of the background she had come from, that she was in a good position to, I guess dispassionately, I don't know if that's the right word, to talk about what we were witnessing now in the public sphere, centering on J.K. Rowling, but actually much bigger than that. Like she uses J.K. Rowling as kind of the through line, and of course she's like appears throughout it. But I mean, like I love that episode. I think it's like episode 4 where she goes into like the early internet. But the focus of that is actually a little bit past the period I'm talking about, which is more like early 2000s internet in Tumblr culture. So I never got into that, but I was on the edges of that too. And I never, got in too deeply because I feel like it was for people probably slightly younger than us.
Yeah. I think Tumblr was even, that would have been like 2010s, wouldn't it?
I think they're talking about slightly before that time. Okay. But it continues on to that time too.
Yeah.
But definitely, from the 2000s anyway, Tumblr's around. And so, so the episode, that's like a 4th episode. So even before that, she's talking about the 90s and then the reception that Harry Potter has when it's first released. And this is where I feel like I'm a little bit too old for this. I did read Harry Potter, not right when it came out, but I'm pretty sure I read the first book in 1999. So it would have been published in 1996. So it was only a few years later. And I was a bit too old for it to affect me the way that I think it affected a whole generation of people. But I actually did get into it. I do remember being really excited by the midnight release of one of them. I think it was book 4 or something. Like, I don't know. But then it goes into how even in the 90s, a lot of people were trying to ban Harry Potter books, especially religious groups, and especially Christian groups in America. So that gets explored before we then shift to basically the subsequent years after that. And I think the thing that has really kind of gripped me about this series is when it starts to explore internet culture and then talking about that stuff around Tumblr and 4chan. And I mean, 4chan is one of those, I personally have never visited 4chan. You might have, but I've certainly heard about it a lot over the years. And like I said, but I didn't go deep in Tumblr either. Like it just wasn't, to me, like that wasn't just the kind of vibe that I was, just like LiveJournal, those kinds of things weren't really for me. But yeah, anyway, so that's why this podcast I find is a really interesting cultural history is kind of the thing why I recommend it. Obviously there's the whole discussion, and now I think we're up to episode 5. Now it really goes into the kind of transgender controversy of the last couple of years, that J.K. Rowling's kind of, I guess she's like the figurehead in some ways, because she's like one of the most powerful people on the planet kind of getting embroiled with this stuff. But yeah, it's pretty chaotic, like because the podcast I think does a pretty good job of, you hear people's voices from different sides of the discussion. But I think anyone who's interested in taking a step back and and who's not so ideological about this, I think would find it interesting. I mean, some of it isn't like super new to those of us who are kind of interested in this topic anyway, especially internet culture. But I think the way it's laid out, I find it really compelling. I hope people will listen to it. But of course, in a lot of the circles that some of us move in, even mentioning J.K. Rowling is probably enough to get you cancelled. So I did have a second thought thinking, oh, should I mention this podcast? But I'm like, no, fuck it. I actually am finding it really great to listen to and really compelling. And I just really appreciate that cultural history, which going back to that earlier point we were talking about, I just feel like it doesn't get documented enough. Thinking about the early
internet stuff.
Yeah, the early internet, and then how it's kind of morphed as well. And so, yeah, just as someone who's kind of a nerd for that, I just really appreciate hearing, and also about pockets of the internet that I didn't necessarily frequent that much myself. Like, just the stuff around Tumblr was pretty interesting. Like, I felt like when I heard it, I sort of had heard about this before, but because I was never one of those people, I mean, I probably have had a few Tumblrs, but I kind of didn't really use it the way that other people used it.
Yeah, no, neither did I. I always had them. I just had it for like, I basically didn't produce anything. I just reblogged things or liked things. I didn't really do anything like sort of iterative on it. Like, but lots of people did. Like, when you had the replies, those big like things. I remember that, but I didn't really use it that much. I would go on it like once a week, if that. Like,
yeah, no, same. And I mean, I back in the day, this was before like Squarespace and even WordPress and that. I did see people would use it sometimes just for like a personal website. I think I tried to do that, but even that wasn't that successful for me. It just wasn't the right platform.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting hearing about the culture, the subcultures that it bred, like, and how that links to the moment we're in now, which I found pretty compelling as an argument.
That's something that Angela Nagle talks about in her book Kill All Normies. Like, she basically juxtaposes 4chan culture with Tumblr culture, and that's essentially the two sides of the culture wars at the moment, right? Like, they all stem from that. Like,
well, I think that's the argument.
One's more left and one's more right. Like,
yeah, and they basically, I think they do refer to that book. If I can't remember now in that episode, but that's kind of
former guest Angela Nagle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, cool. Oh, good get. Yeah, no. So I think, I don't know. I just found that. So that was an interesting thing to kind of mull over, and I mean, I'm still kind of mulling over it because I haven't finished listening to it because it's still being released. I don't know how many episodes there are, but we are kind of being brought now to the present moment after they've kind of laid the groundwork over the last 15 years, basically. And yeah, I mean, I think, but I mean, this is the bad moment we're in where even saying you want to listen to this podcast is a problem, and never mind that it's well produced and everything. Although I do note that one of the producers is this guy who Andy Mills, and he's kind of like this problematic podcast producer around. Like he I don't know. I mean, but maybe they were just allegations. But anyway, I think the guy's probably good at his job, but perhaps dodgy in other ways, because I think like he got accused of sexual harassment or something. Anyway, but anyway, as a listening experience and as a podcast, yeah, it's well done. It's worth a listen. And I've been telling a few people about it, but obviously I'm telling you now and on the podcast whoever's listening. But I guess it's not the kind of thing I've been like tweeting about, because I don't use Twitter that much anyway for that kind of thing. But I think I hope that it will stand the test of time in terms of, at least as a cultural history of what we're all going through.
Yeah, I've actually had a look at it. I haven't listened to it, but I actually had a look at it because on our on the Apple, I don't know if you have an Apple or listen to podcasts in Apple Podcasts, but they do recommends underneath when you look at different podcasts, and ours that has that show as one of them.
So, what does that say?
I don't know if that means we'll get cancelled, but and I had a look at some of the episodes, and it's interesting that you talked about the internet culture stuff, because I just thought it was just some J.K. Rowling thing. Like, I didn't realize that they actually talk about that sort of stuff.
No, that's what made it.
Things.
Yeah, and that's the moment I'm like, whoa, this is really great. Like, hearing this, like, I was, hooked. Because there was stuff about the Christian right in America. I mean, that stuff didn't interest me quite as much. I sort of knew about that, but I kind of didn't care. Like that they're like burning Harry Potter books or something, because it's just dumb. But then and then I mean, look, and J.K. Rowling herself, I mean, she's extremely intelligent. She's great to listen to as well in this. But of course, lots of people are like, she gets too much space already in the culture. But I don't know that she gets that much space in lots of parts of the culture, actually, because people don't even want to hear what she wants to say. I don't know. I mean, look, without giving myself away too much about what I think. I mean, I'm just thinking through all these things, and I spend time when I get a chance just thinking about, well, what's going on in the world, right? And not just in this space. Like, I mean, I guess I'm embroiled in all these other things that are probably I don't have less of a choice about in some ways, in terms of the race stuff and everything, just because of my own position. And so, but I think that there are kind of parallels across all of these kind of conversations, basically, and how difficult it is to be nuanced or to resist or to say something differently. So I think a podcast like this, I mean, people like me are like idle listeners, I guess, because we're kind of interested in broader narratives as well, of like not just the who's the right and wrong in this discussion, and especially people who are probably wary of like taking sides anyway. And you just want to just hear what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how else I can recommend this podcast. I really feel like if you're all those things, if you tick those boxes, you might also enjoy this podcast. But the internet culture stuff, like, I really, really loved that bit, because it's just been on my mind as well, and thinking about the early internet, because I guess maybe I'm in mourning, because obviously the internet is just kind of dying as we know it.
It used to be great.
It used to be great.
I feel like
it's kind of bad.
I feel like we're like the how like it's funny because in the 90s there were the aging hippies who were like nostalgic for the 60s, and it's all about the 60s, man. The 60s, you had to be there, man. And now we're them, but for the 90s.
No, we are. But it's funny because actually, going back to like the 90s and the Simpsons and that, but like when you watch the Simpsons, you realize like how often like the 60s and 70s is kind of referenced, and how close that felt at the time. And now, obviously, we're now the same distance from the 90s as like the 90s was from like 60s and 70s almost.
Totally.
But I don't know. I mean, in a way, I guess it is up to people like us to make sure that memory is kind of like repeated and like, not forgotten.
Keep the hypercolor flame of the 90s.
So yeah. Anyway, so those are my recommendations, like partly stemming from a similar place. But yeah, I mean, I guess I got other things too, but like I'm watching Flashman's in Trouble at the moment, which I'm kind of finding quite interesting as well. But but that's my main recommendation for now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sheila, and thank you for joining us and giving
Thanks for having me on.
Your old and your new. Konbanwa.
Konbanwa.
This is Zach Langley Chichi. How's your Nomi Malone in Japan drag queen fantasy going?
It's going great. I'm more famous than ever. I'm so famous now that I'm getting like in shady little fights with half Brazilian, half Japanese drag queens who are like 5'2", and they're like insulting my makeup, and we're getting like catty and cunty.
I remember hearing this on your Sirens episode. Was it on Sirens? I think it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Can you recount for our audience what happened there?
Well, in the continuing story of Zach Langley Chichi, I have joined a drag house, and on the night of my induction, we went for a few drinks after, and I was wearing my new breastplate, feeling fierce. I did my own hair. I thought I looked great. And then this tiny little creature appears and points at me and goes, "Raph." So yeah, I'm developing some thick skin because no one can come for my podcast. But if you insult my makeup, I will be offended.
Did you like? So obviously, in the moment, you were very emotional, perhaps like and taken aback. Do you kind of find it funny now? I find
it very funny now. I mean, I found it immediately funny like the next day, but I was like shaken up in the moment. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. But no, I think it's very funny now, and I'm very good at turning any small little difficulty or hurdle into a I'm so popular plot point. So throw it all at me. I hope they all like come at me with knives or something next.
Yeah, it's all just like steps on the ladder until you get onto RuPaul's Drag Race.
That's what everyone's saying.
I love that your strategy is to go in as like the bad guy. Like,
oh yeah, that's like that's the only way they would keep me on the show for more than like 3 episodes is if I'm intentionally causing problems. So that's my goal.
Is there a Drag Race Japan yet?
So they have greenlit a version of Drag Race, but the details of it are not out yet, and it's going to be very different. It's going to be probably like more Japanese style TV than Western, because competition shows like that don't translate very well to Japanese attention. So stuff like The Bachelor exists here, but it's very, very different. So I think they're working on developing what their approach is, but it is happening.
But don't the Japanese have like this sort of very similar competitive aspect that I would think that'll work well? It's different for game shows, is it? Or like
yeah, I think it's just there is that competitive element, and it is especially evident like in idol subcultures when you're like watching like these girls kind of like secretly thrash for the top spot in the group. But that's where the secret is that they're doing it secretly. Japanese people have the inward face kind of psychological phenomenon where they are very rarely outwardly confrontational. Even if you watch Terrace House, which is like this equivalent to like Japanese Real World, it takes them 40 episodes before they start fighting. And their fight is like what 2 Americans say to each other over like eggs during breakfast,
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the missing ingredient.
And for Drag Race, you want those fights. Although I've stopped watching Drag Race like many, many seasons ago because there weren't enough fights. So
yeah, this most recent season I'm enjoying because, well, I enjoyed the first half of it because they trimmed the episodes back down to 40 minutes and it was very lively. It was like a lot faster. But yeah, the show hasn't had any like real drama or hatred since the Vixen on season 10.
Oh yeah, everyone hated her, but I loved that. I was so here for that.
Yeah, I was so here for her. She caused problems. She looked good occasionally, and she was like so obsessed with herself. These are all of the ingredients of a successful drag queen.
She looked good occasionally. That's like a moment to put the shade rattle over. Occasionally. Gia Gunn realness over here.
Absolutely.
Okay, like only the gays are going to know what we're talking about here, but we should move on from Drag Race.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to say as well, like, if people who are listening and haven't subscribed to Zach's podcast, you should do immediately on Patreon. Give him money. The one I messaged you actually about. I rarely message like podcasters or whatever. But like I DM'd you out to that Holocaust trilogy. It was fucking amazing. Like I kind of like broke down in my car. I had to pull over, like especially that last episode with your mum, talking about your grandfather who was a SS officer. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, this was just incredible. And I also loved I don't know anything about this subculture, but I just loved it. The Idol episode with Shark.
Thank you. I love the episode too. I'm so glad you listened. I'm slowly trying to brainwash people into accepting this.
This is what we were, before we were recording, we were talking about like how far as a gay man you descend into the Dionysian swamp, and I feel like I don't know anything about idol culture, and I feel like if I dip my toe in, I'm going to be pulled down into the sort of maelstrom of like utter fucking nonsense.
Oh no, it's awful. And I'm like so drowned in it now. Like once you get roped in, you are a permanently weird, malfunctioning person that everyone is a little uncomfortable with because it's really hard to get into and you have to like force yourself to. But I love talking about it because it's something that no one knows anything about. It's so unfamiliar in the West, and I feel like I had to introduce it because it compels me so.
And it looks like such a project because it's like you have to like research all of these people in these idol groups, which sometimes contain like 16 members or more, you know. So it seems like something that like on a rainy day you might want to investigate and just like go down the vortex. And I also really loved you know, the episode you did with Jacques about Gwen Stefani as well.
Oh, like, yeah, on his show. Yeah, Jacques is lovely. I'm obsessed with him.
Yeah, me too. He's moving to my city, actually, so it's going to be fun to hang out.
Oh, he's finally getting out of the countryside, is it?
Yeah. But, like, I don't know why I found this so funny, but, like, on the Gwen Stefani app on Jacques' show, Unpopular, subscribe. I think it was you. You were like, I hate Fergie. And then one of this tirade about Fergie, it was so good.
She's a messy, weird bitch. And then I felt vindicated because like 2 weeks later, this like Twitter thread went viral of like her like screaming during like live performances. And I was like, I knew it.
And her like
fake ass bitch.
Pitchy as fuck. My favorite video of her is that pitchy as fuck performance of the national anthem. Have you seen? Oh, it's terrible.
What does she say? She's like, you want to play some ball, boys?
But yeah, so obviously been kicking goals in the podcast world, which is very nice. But I brought you on here today as one of my illustrious past and future guests, hopefully, if you'll come on again, to talk about something old and something new that you're really kind of fucking into. Like, because this show is all about passion. So what do you want to do first, the old or the new?
Let's do the old.
All right. Give me the old. Hit me.
It's Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare.
Yes. That is so old. That is the oldest I've gotten so far.
It's quite old. I try to read at least one or two Shakespeare plays that I haven't read before every year. There's plenty, so I haven't read quite a bit. And recently I read Antony and Cleopatra for the first time, and I thought it was just spectacular, and I have failed to go a day without thinking about it since, purely because of the last act and Cleopatra. She is one of the most exciting characters ever drawn. I feel like she is such a crystalline and perfect female archetype. The fact that this is like 500 years old and like is still like the prescient way that like women and like sexual figures are depicted, I just takes my breath away.
So you love the last scene, so when she kills herself.
Yes. So of course, you know, Antony and Cleopatra is about the famous Egyptian queen. She's torn up in war, and it's about her suicide via the asp. That's what it's about on paper, but really what it is an ego spinning out from the confines of the flesh and into the permanent history of the world.
I actually haven't read that one. But obviously I know the story, and I love the movie, the Elizabeth Taylor movie.
Yes.
Do you love it? Of course you do.
I do. My mom was a big Liz Taylor fan, and she sat me down on the couch and made me watch all 4 hours of that movie. And I thought it was just spectacular, even when I was like 15 and had the attention span of a rabbit.
I have to say, the more I hear about your mum, the more I fucking love her.
Everyone loves her. She's the diva.
Yeah. Like just she was so great on both the podcast appearances you had her on. But also when you told me like she was super into Star Trek, I was like, yeah, awesome. So was my mum, so was I, like, and that you grew up around that. That's really cute. I love that.
Yeah, I just had like Picard talking in the house all the time.
That's why you're such a reasonable, diplomatic person, Zach.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm so professional.
So what is it about Anthony and Cleopatra then, other than the suicide? Because I know you like glamorous, sort of exquisite suicides, like Mishima, which we've talked about before. But
that's right. Well, I think for me, it's that I don't know about you, but I have a very oversized sense of sexuality, and I really feel every day of my life is just my heart and my body being slowly pulled apart by my attraction to other men.
And speak on it.
It's like every second I'm like, I'm like being turned into a vortex by the gravitational pull of men's gazes around me. Like, and it's very rare to find that sentiment accurately portrayed. And Mishima, of course, is one of the greats at it. I would say The Piano Teacher, both the Jelinek novel and the Haneke film adaptation kind of scratch that itch as well. But most of the time, especially when women write it, it feels quite distant and not real. But for some reason, the unrequited and extraordinary passion of Cleopatra in these monologues is like so my tea. It's so my vibe. And when I was reading it, I was like getting weepy and emotional. And I guess it might be hard to imagine for some people like crying to like Shakespeare on the page, but it is just that powerful and resonant to me.
Do you want to give us a little
I'm looking for quotes now. I knew you were going to ask me. Let's see. I want to find a good Cleopatra monologue in my big old marked copy here. My desolation does begin to make a better life. 'Tis paltry to be Caesar, not being Fortune, but he's Fortune's knave, a minister of her will. And it is great to do that thing that ends all other deeds, which shackles accidents and bolts up change, which sleeps and never pallets more the dung, the beggar's nurse, and Caesar's. This is, of course, when she's like reflecting on the tightening political snare around her. And the way that she talks is simultaneously very manipulative and performative. And she's constantly wearing this mask that she rarely lets slide. However, you can always like feel the emotionality and the sex drive that's really motivating all of her choices.
Yeah, that does sound sexy. I'll have to read it. What do you think about... I don't know if I want to wade into this territory, but what do you think about just generally about the Shakespeare authorship question, which that's such a meme kind of like thing. Would you have gone to the De Vere ball if you were there?
No comment. I don't want. I like when people are trying to do things together, so I will leave it at that. But I will say that Josh, formerly of Evil Thespian, said something really powerful to me, which is that it doesn't matter if Shakespeare is a person; Shakespeare is a force. Like he, and I think this is very true of the Folio, is that his literature is like the product of so much cultural winds, like brewing for centuries, and even if the plays hadn't been written, like that force would exist like somewhere. So it doesn't really mean anything to me if Shakespeare was real or not, but I do think Shakespeare wrote these roles, and I want to believe that one man is capable of so much mastery. I'd like to believe that.
Yeah, and the thing about like the Shakespeare authorship question as well, I don't really care either. Like it's just the work is the work, you know. But it's interesting because it's like because he's writing in other than the sonnets, which is just poetry, which he would have just you know done in his garret or wherever the fuck he wrote. But theater is such a collaborative art form, so it's not like he technically would have 100% wrote it anyway. There would have been like input from like the actors and like everyone else involved in productions and things like that anyway. So it's like, even if it was Willie Shakespeare, like it's not like it was 100% all his, you know. but I guess the idea of that forceful vision that Josh was talking about, I think is the most important part, I reckon, anyway.
Absolutely. And one other thing I love about this is that it just has this like kind of like Blanche Dubois, like camp appeal behind him. She says things like, "Give me my robe, put on my crown. I have immortal longings in me."
Yes, Boots.
And it's like, yes, I do have immortal longings in me. And like Mishima, Cleopatra in the text like styles her own suicide as this great ritual and token of her love that cements her into history through her own force of will, or something like that. And she gets all of her regalia and her crown and these like jewels to put on as she like lies out with her tits exposed to be bitten, and then she just is literally like sitting there like, I have immortal longings in me.
It's so good. Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, what is it about female characters and gay men? I try to think about this and I'm not sure what it is.
What it is that when you because most of the great female archetypes, like by Tennessee Williams or Shakespeare or any gay author, like they write women so brilliantly because they're not writing women, they're writing shades of themselves and of their opinions of the men that they're having sex with and are lusting after. But when you try to install that depiction of men into men, it becomes kind of disgusting and like ironic and
unseemly.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like this, like pointing at myself, it becomes this. So when they channel it into a woman, rough, baby queen. When they like channel it into a woman, they give that one single layer that makes it so that you can take it more seriously without kind of having that the disgust.
Well, yeah, because even a gay man getting overly emotional is always just a bit cringy.
Oh yeah,
like you're just like, ugh.
Me crying on my show every other week.
No, that's beautiful, Zach. I love you crying on your show.
Thank you. I've been doing it very often this season. I think that the counter is up to 3. Whoops.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about Antony and Cleopatra?
No, I just would say that it is important and refreshing, I think, for readers and those who don't read alike to spend time with Shakespeare, because this is where every archetype and every cliche and the entire dramatic structure of art comes from. And they always get mad about teaching Shakespeare in schools, and there's like this like woke argument for abolishing Shakespeare and like bringing in diversity and voices of color and like reading lots of like YA fun fiction.
How do you know Shakespeare wasn't black?
Absolutely. Shakespeare could have been Miss Queen. We don't know. Like, hello. But the thing about Shakespeare is that once you read him and you know how to read him and you can like go and parse his literature, your media literacy becomes unparalleled and you can pick apart every single book or TV show or news article you encounter. It like really is like a key that unlocks like a greater understanding of the world.
Yeah. And also I would say as well, on a practical level, people go to Shakespeare and they're just, if they're not like well versed in it, they'll see a play or something and they might not like be able to sort of follow the language and stuff. It is actually easier to read. Like if you actually read the plays, and you can kind of connect with it more on there. So like as literature, it works too. I like seeing the plays, but like reading it is a really good introduction to, especially if you get one of those good sort of volumes that like
the Folger ones that have like the stuff on the side. Yeah. And they're very satisfying and like thick, and I love these like stupid like glittery covers they have. I like collecting them. It's like, oh, look at the
it looks like colors. It actually looks like one of those sort of like it reminds me of no one can see this, but like it reminds me of like a kind of chick lit.
Yes, totally. I mean, Shakespeare does great chick lit as well.
Yeah, he does great chick lit.
Absolutely.
Okay, so do you want to get into the new? So
it's not super new.
This is what everyone said so far.
Okay, it's like last 30 years. I could have picked something like really new. I was thinking about picking Sally Rooney, actually.
Okay,
I was
which one?
That's why I didn't do it, is because I don't have a physical copy of Conversations with Friends. So if I had a physical copy of that, I would have done that. But
I'm gonna like I'm going to do like a 3-part series on all her books. With like different, so you choose whichever one you want to do. We can do like, and you can be
Conversations with Friends.
Okay, we'll do it. All right,
that's her best book.
I thought about like getting Angela Nagle on again as well, and like because she's Irish, and like make her read some Sally Rooney.
Yeah, make her read Normal People.
Yeah, I'll do that. Anyway,
okay. So what my new item is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace.
I love for everyone who's listening, Zach is also holding it up like a presenter.
I'm doing show and tell.
Yeah.
Listen, I have all of these physical books that, God help me if I ever have to move again. Like, I'm getting my credit for owning these.
That's the worst. Yeah.
The tub of books was the reason I had to pay for a moving van.
I have a tub of books too. I have like 4 tubs of books.
And when I was in college, I would move every year, obviously. And so like it was just taking the tub, taking the 2 tubs, the next year taking the 3. Yeah, but I think Infinite Jest is one of the best pieces of literature of all time. It is unfairly maligned. It is actually read by no one. Anyone who says that they read it is usually lying. They're not telling you the truth. It is a symbolic.
I've lied about reading it.
Of course you have. And it's a symbolic object that I don't have the cloud cover, I don't have that one, but it's like an item to give yourself like hipster sheen. So you can put down Infinite Jest on your table and suggest something about yourself. But the actual book, unlike most of Wallace's other writing, is transcendental.
Okay.
So now you obviously have a thought about this. So why do you hate it so much?
No, I don't hate it at all. Like I started reading it and then was like, all right. And then sort of like, because when I first encountered it was when I was trying to be like a lit hipster when I was in my 20s. And so I started, I bought it, obviously. And it was more important, I think, to buy it, to have it, than to actually read it. It's kind of like like you say, a sort of status symbol. And I read the first, would have been like 50 pages or something like that. And I'm like, I'm gonna read something else. Like I had like a couple, because I like usually read like 5 things at once. And I was just like, sometimes things just go to the bottom of the pile. And that just basically kept falling down because it's so big and daunting. And back then I think I was sort of, I was more kind of afraid of bigger books, now I'm not, like I don't care, but I think it was just I just can't. I have it, so I have the hipster cred, so I'm just going to put it on the shelf and read other things. But
the thing is that I have heard this story countless times of people who read the first 50 or the first 100 pages and they give up because they have to keep flipping to the back of the book to do the footnotes, or they are uncertain of what's going on. They don't have a grasp on anything. I will tell you, you don't get a feel for like the rhythmic like structure of this book until about 300 pages in. And the book is like meant to be reread over and over again. So you won't even like realize that the first chapter of the book is actually like the chronologically like last piece that happens in the history until like reading number 2. But it's not the formal conventions or like the postmodern stuff that excites me. It's that it kind of swallows what it's like to exist in a post-80s media landscape where there is nothing but constant information happening in bizarre time loops constantly. And it's only gotten worse with phones and social media, where we have like opera happening on our phone, just narrative all the time. It takes the sensation of that, and instead of being like a defeatist and whimpering in the face of that tragedy, it actually is a narrative about overcoming it and looking up at the sky and like feeling like ecstasy. It's also a book about overcoming addiction, which I don't care about. This is the only depiction of like drug addiction that I've ever been like, wow, because this is about mostly marijuana addiction, which is the only thing that I think it's like a uniquely like Zoomer phenomenon of like the weed addict in this book. Like prelocating it decades before it would even happen, I think is also really genius.
Mm. Yeah, you never.
It's a lot to swallow, but so is this book.
Yeah, and obviously the tennis.
Oh yeah. I think the tennis is fun because I like that kind of autistic detail. Like, one of the things I like most about Neon Genesis Evangelion is like the extreme amount of jargon that is completely perfectly applied to every episode. And so once you get it, it feels like a whole new, like, woo. And so I like the tennis, but the best scene in this is one of the characters, a recovering drug addict, becomes possessed by the ghost of the lead character. And when he's possessed by this ghost, he starts speaking in a way more like articulate and sort of highfalutin way. And it's this terrifying 10-page sequence where he starts losing his identity because he is disassociating from the words that are coming out of his mouth. And it's like one of the most like harrowing like depictions of what it means to be a person and be confined to this realm of the spoken word where the only you anyone will ever know is the you create with your words. And this is one of the first books that really helped cement that sensation for me, and I'll always love it for that.
It's kind of like the and that links back to all the media stuff, like the mass media kind of creation of people as sort of like conglomerations of information or something like that. Like, is that the vibe there?
That's definitely part of the vibe. I mean, all of these characters are like so like lost and are such failures, and they have these enormous struggles to become people and not just like shadows of words. It's a lot about irony as well and embracing sincerity. And
it really breaks my question as well. I've read him on sincerity versus irony, and I've always thought that why is there a distinction? Like, what's the...
I think we've also talked about this before too.
Have
like we? I think it came up on the Dead Stars episode.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I'm also not that interested in the question. But when I look around...
moving on.
It's like... But you know what I mean? It's like when I do look around... Because I don't have any struggle with this. My irony is my sincerity. Like, deprecation is like a part of me expressing myself. But I do see people who are very hollow and depleted of spirit, like young people around me who rely on irony as like a crux of a personality. And it's not a natural gesture from them.
It's like a pose.
It is a pose. That's exactly what it is.
And that's all it is. Like irony to me that is really fun if it's used in a kind of cutting, critical sort of way, like an old grande dame drag queen kind of like it's just being ironic is funny. Like, but if you're using it as this sort of pose to, I don't know, it seems like a way to sort of delay, like you said, getting into those like deeper spiritual truths and things like that, just it's like a skittish, fearful thing, I think, the way that it's kind of used by a lot of
society is like plagued with fear and no one wants to endure any pain. Everyone wants everything to be like Fisher-Price McDonald's, where everything is accessible, easy, and delivered to your door without an interaction, so they can like shrink further into themselves. And this book is like so much about that, and it's like really about like the terror of existing and being known, and the gap between the way you perceive yourself and how you articulate yourself. And I love that it's so ultimately optimistic, because this like American, like in the book, Canada and America have become like a conglomerate nation. Every year you can buy the rights to titling it after your product. So there's like Year of the Depend adult undergarment, And there's like so much cynicism that's like floating around like this hazy drug ironic meme culture of the novel, but like it really does like believe in like the truth of the tangible human experience, and that's really moving to me.
Are you going to read a bit? You've got it open.
I have it open. It's on the very last page of the book, and the last sequence goes much. It's like very early in the chronology of events, but it's when Don Gately, one of the protagonists, is at his lowest of his drug addiction. And Wallace writes, "The last rotating sight was the chinks coming back through the door, holding big shiny squares of the room. As the floor wafted up and C's grip finally gave, the last thing Gately saw was an Oriental bearing down with a held square, and he looked into the square and saw clearly a reflection of his own big, square, pale head, with its eyes closing as the floor finally pounced. And when he came back to, he was flat on his back on the beach in the freezing sand, and it was raining out of a low sky, and the tide was way out." And this, of course, Gately becomes a much better person as like the book progresses, and so to go in the very last moment to like him at his absolute lowest, like being like racist and horrible and passing out from a drug episode, and then the moment at which he wakes up and starts changing his life as he looks at like the rainy beach, it's very beautiful to me.
And it's almost the way it's written too is almost biblical.
You
know, like when you read the Bible and it's like, and then this happened, and then this, and then this, you know, like
yeah,
so he's clearly kind of drawing on that.
He's a big Shakespeare fan as well. Infinite Jest is a quote from, I believe, Hamlet.
Okay. Do you know who says that in Hamlet?
Either Rosencrantz or Guildenstern.
Okay, interesting.
Maybe. I'm not sure, though. I'm not a big Hamlet person.
No. You're an Antony and Cleopatra person.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, so did you have any more thoughts on David Foster Wallace? Just in general, maybe as like,
I think the rest of his books are not that good. Like everything else I've read, I've like been pretty displeased with. I read The Broom of the System last year, and it like slowed my reading pace down from like 4 books a month to 1 as I limped through it. That speech he does, like the fish and water thing, is like fine. His like drug addiction and suicide, that all happened, but honestly, I don't really care for his artistic outer persona. Everything he ever needed to say is in here.
Okay, we'll have to read it. Did you like any of his essays?
I have never read a collection of his essays before. I've read a bunch of his short stories and I liked those, but I've never read any of his nonfiction.
Yeah, I've actually read more of his nonfiction than his fiction, so I'll have to rectify that. But like, he does have interesting things to say, I think, about like the way he talks about television is really interesting.
Yeah, and this is all about TV, because like Infinite Jest is this it's this thing that you watch and it's so transfixing and pleasant that you die watching it, because your brain is so like transfixed on it that you become like comatose and die.
Have you ever I forget who mentioned this, but they were talking about the postmodern kind of novelists in the 80s and 90s, and they used this term hysterical realism, and I think they applied it to his book as well. Would you agree
absolutely
with that, kind of that?
Yeah, I think like the kind of like a corporate like sheen and like the nuclear like wastelands that are like popping up, as well as the really bizarrely accurately drawn like Massachusetts that exists in this book. Like I feel like this is like what's actually happening, but it's like stated very plainly and without any embellishment. So while like really absurd stuff is like constantly going on, there's like a bunch of like handicapped terrorists in the book, like plotting out like terrorism. Like there's wild stuff all the time, but like when you kind of look at like history and then you give it the elevation that a novel usually implies, it reaches the same effect as this describing bizarre stuff flatly. So I do think this is very indicative of how like the world actually works. Hysterical realism is a great way of describing it.
I love hysteria more than realism, to be quite honest, though. It's
fun, yeah, but I completely agree.
That just might be a gay thing.
I think so.
All right. Did you have anything more to say about either of those?
No, I'm happy to talk about books anytime. I'm very thankful you brought me on, and I hope at least one person is inspired to read one of these from my feeble attempts at talking about them.
I'm sure they will. And thank you for sharing your passions, old and new.
My pleasure.
I would hold the hand of the one who could lead me places, and kiss the lips of the one who could sing so sweet.